Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable and relax. When I was 12 years old, I had a friend whose fascination with the devil became a consuming obsession. She frequently claimed she had sold her soul to him, and while her declarations unsettled me, they also intrigued me. It felt like she wielded a power over her own narrative, akin to a character from a story I had yet to fully decipher. One day, she brought an Ouija board to school, convinced that it would be our gateway to the supernatural realm. Her excitement was infectious, and I found myself swept up in the idea of connecting with something beyond. Hello everyone. I am your dark narrator here to guide you today. I know many of you use this video to help you drift off to sleep, but before you do, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also drop a comment letting us know where you're from and what time you're watching. Now settle in, get comfortable and relax. When I was 12 years old, I had a friend whose fascination with the devil became a consuming obsession. She frequently claimed she had sold her soul to him, and while her declarations unsettled me, they also intrigued me. It felt like she wielded a power over her own narrative, akin to a character from a story I had yet to fully decipher. One day, she brought an Ouija board to school, convinced that it would be our gateway to the supernatural realm. Her excitement was infectious, and I found myself swept up in the idea of connecting with something beyond our ordinary lives. We decided to sneak into a dimly lit bathroom during lunch, our hearts racing with the thrill of secrecy. The peeling paint on the walls and flickering overhead lights created an atmosphere ripe for a supernatural encounter. Once inside, we turned off all the lights, enveloping ourselves in a thick blanket of darkness. Armed with only the faintest glow from the stray light peeking through the cracks, we placed our fingers lightly on the planchette, its wood cold beneath our touch. At first, as we attempted to summon spirits, nothing significant happened. My skepticism began to rise. I couldn't shake the feeling that my friend was somehow manipulating the planchette, moving it ever so slightly under the guise of a spirit's influence. However, the air around us felt charged, electric with anticipation, like static before a storm. As we continued, I stole a glance into the shadows, and my heart almost stopped. There, amidst the thick veil of darkness, I saw a pair of piercing green eyes. They glowed with an unsettling luminescence unlike anything I had encountered before. They seemed to absorb the surrounding light and radiate an almost eerie allure. Fear gripped my chest as I realized we had, perhaps unknowingly, crossed a threshold into something far darker than our innocent game had intended. These eyes weren't the fiery red of demons from horror stories. Instead, they emanated a chilling, otherworldly presence, sending shivers down my spine. Instinctively, I knew we needed to escape the bathroom. As I emerged from the suffocating darkness, I reached out and grasped her hand, feeling the cool tile beneath our feet contrasting sharply with the warmth of our intertwined fingers. However, as we rounded the corner, she suddenly paused, her brow furrowing and a look of bewilderment crossing her face. "Why are we in such a hurry?" she asked, confusion clouding her features. Time seemed to stretch in that moment, my heart hammering in my chest as I hesitated, grappling with what I had just witnessed. "What about the eyes? Did you see them?" I blurted out in desperation. Her reaction was surprising. She stared at me as though I had lost my grip on reality. "What eyes?" she replied, shaking her head with incredulity. She didn't see anything amiss. To her it appeared I was simply anxious. I felt a wave of disorientation wash over me. It was as though I had conjured a hallucination while she remained blissfully ignorant of the truth lurking in the darkness. After that disconcerting encounter, it felt as if she had vanished from existence altogether. There were no traces of her at school, no fleeting glimpses in the hallway or murmurs of her name. My mind raced with unanswered questions and a growing sense of urgency as I inquired with teachers and classmates, seeking even a hint, a glimmer of recognition. Their responses, however, were the same: blank stares and laughter, dismissive incredulity. "I don't know who you're talking about," they would say, leaving me feeling increasingly isolated and bewildered. In the following nights, a gnawing sense of unease enveloped me like a heavy cloak. It felt as if reality itself had subtly shifted, leaving me trapped in a world that grew increasingly distorted with each passing day. Small anomalies became my constant companions. The paint on my bedroom walls seemed to shift hues mysteriously. A beloved book would inexplicably vanish from my shelf, or I would catch a fleeting reflection in the mirror that didn't quite align with my own features. The most jarring experience, though, was the disorientation that came with time. Days blended together, feeling strangely out of order, and I would sometimes awaken with the unsettling certainty that years had slipped by while the calendar insistently declared otherwise. With each new day, an undercurrent of dread coiled tightly around my chest, whispering that something profoundly wrong lay beneath the surface of my life. A sinister reality unraveling around me, and I was the only one aware of this disruption in the fabric of existence. Weeks later, I received a notification from an unfamiliar user on social media. The name sparked faint recognition, and as we began chatting, a chilling truth emerged. She had tricked me. The friend I once knew was not who she seemed. She was a demon. By touching the Ouija board that day, I had unwittingly cursed myself, sealing my fate. She explained that each night my essence would drift through shifting realities, each one leading me closer to the grotesque realm of hell. Overwhelmed by the sheer weight of this revelation, I withdrew from the world. I barricaded myself in my room for a week, emerging only for food or to use the bathroom, too terrified to engage anyone. The faces around me, my family, my friends, seemed like hollow shells, mere puppets created by some malignant force intent on driving me mad. I had not lost my sanity. Rather, I had come to accept the crushing reality of my existence. It dawned on me that one day I would inevitably descend into hell, and there was nothing I could do to avert that terrifying fate. The first day back to school after summer break is always a strange mix of excitement and dread. The smell of fresh textbooks, the glossy sheen of waxed floors, and the palpable anxiety hanging in the air made my stomach churn as I walked through the gates of Oakwood High. Little did I know this particular year would haunt me forever. As I made my way through the corridor, I noticed a crowd gathered outside the classroom. My curiosity piqued, and I edged closer, my heart thumping louder in my chest. It wasn't long before I saw her, the new substitute teacher. She stood at the front of the room, tall and thin, her skin a shade too pale, almost translucent. Her stark white hair framed a gaunt face with eyes that shimmered unnervingly. Her flowing black dress seemed out of place, as if she had stepped from another time entirely. "Class," she began in a smooth, commanding voice, "I'm Ms. Alaric, and I'll be your substitute teacher for the foreseeable future. It's finally good to be back home after all these years." Her presence sent a shiver down my spine, though I couldn't explain why. It was as if the room itself held its breath in her presence. Something was terribly off about her. Oddly, everyone else seemed utterly enchanted by her, almost as if they were drawn to her in ways they couldn't explain. There was a fragrant, mesmerizing scent that surrounded her, almost like jasmine, and people seemed to gravitate toward it without realizing. Except for me. The smell that intoxicated everyone else hit me like a wall of garlic, pungent and foul. Every time she passed by, I had to resist the urge to gag. No one else seemed to notice. However, I have to admit, the first few weeks under Ms. Alaric felt like a dream. Her lessons were mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, and I found myself oddly captivated, unable to look away. But then, things started to change. Slowly at first, like a ripple beneath the surface. It began with my classmates. One by one, they transformed. Matt, the class clown who was always cracking jokes and stirring up trouble, suddenly became silent. He sat at his desk quietly, hunched over, scribbling frantically in his notebook. When I asked him what he was working on, his eyes glazed over and he whispered, "It's important, Ashley. You wouldn't understand." He didn't look up again. Then there was Jessica, the sharp-witted overachiever who used to challenge every rule. She became disturbingly compliant, no longer questioning anything. In fact, she seemed to worship Ms. Alaric. "You're just not seeing the bigger picture, Ash," she'd tell me with a cryptic smile, her eyes glowing with unsettling adoration. More students started acting strangely. Their behavior shifted in unnatural ways. I felt increasingly isolated, like I was the only person left who hadn't changed. And things got worse. Simple arguments soon turned into brutal fights. I watched in horror as a group of my classmates attacked Sam, a quiet kid, just because he disagreed with something Ms. Alaric said. Their faces were twisted with rage, fists flying, while Ms. Alaric stood back watching with cold satisfaction. When the incident was brought to the principal, he barely reacted. The students were given detention, but no real action was taken. It was as if Ms. Alaric's influence had extended to the entire school. Students, teachers, even the janitor. Everyone seemed to fall under her spell, practically worshipping her as she strolled through the hallways. It felt like the whole school had fallen into her control except for me. I was the only one still who continued to be me. But why? Why wasn't I affected like the others? I couldn't figure it out. As the days wore on, it wasn't just their behavior that changed, it was their appearance too. My classmates began to look wrong. Their skin grew pale and waxy, their eyes vacant and unnaturally wide. I remember catching Angela in the bathroom mirror. Her fingernails had become freakishly long and her once bright blue eyes bulged unnaturally. She looked more like a corpse than a living person. "Why are you staring, Ashley?" she asked me in a voice too sweet, as her nails began to scrape down her face. Blood streaked across her cheeks, but she didn't stop, she just smiled. I bolted from the restroom, my heart pounding away in my chest. But the real horror began a week later when students started disappearing from school one by one. It started with Ms. Alaric asking, "Who's ready to volunteer for an exciting project after school hours?" Almost everyone raised their hand, but she chose Matt, who looked super thrilled. That was the last I ever saw of him. He didn't show up the next day. And it happened again the following week when another student would vanish, and no one seemed to care. Not their classmates, not even their parents. Matt's family never filed a police report or even came to the school to ask about their only son's disappearance. I was the only one who found this disturbing, and it terrified me. Determined to uncover the truth, I spent hours digging through old school records in the library. I remembered Ms. Alaric saying on the first day, "It's good to be back in this school after so many years." That meant she had to have been a student here once, or maybe even a teacher. I reasoned there must be records of her somewhere. This school was ancient, so I started poring through the yearbooks, which went back decades. And then I found it. My skin prickled with goosebumps right away when I saw her picture. In the 1986 yearbook, there was Ms. Alaric, only she hadn't aged a day. She was standing among students, looking exactly the same as she does now. The same hairstyle, the same clothes. No sign of aging, not even after nearly 40 years. What chilled me to the bone was the name under her picture. It wasn't Ms. Alaric, it was Pamela. Panicking, I tore the page from the yearbook, but just then I heard a voice behind me, icy and calm. "What are you doing, Ashley?" Ms. Alaric stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. I froze. My mouth opened, but no words came out. "Curiosity can be dangerous," she said softly, a sinister smile curling her lips. I bolted from the room, not daring to look back. Her laughter echoed in my ears as I ran as if my life depended on it. I next went straight to the police station where my Uncle Henry worked as an officer. I showed him the evidence and tried to explain what had been happening. He listened patiently, but I could tell he was skeptical, until I showed him the page from the yearbook. When he ran a background check, he found out that Ms. Alaric had gone missing in 1986. She disappeared during a trek in the Appalachian Mountains and was never heard from again. Armed with this new information, Uncle Henry promised to investigate further. The next day, Uncle Henry arrived at the school with another officer. I watched from a distance as they questioned Ms. Alaric in the hallway. The conversation grew heated, and soon tempers began to fly. Suddenly, my uncle removed his gun from his holster and shot his colleague point blank in the face. I gasped, frozen in stunned silence as I watched the officer's body slowly crumple to the floor. Uncle Henry's expression was blank, like he was under a spell, and he walked toward me, gun in hand, like I was now the enemy. He grabbed my wrist and dragged me to where Ms. Alaric stood. The students gathered around, their vacant eyes fixed on me, waiting for her command. I'd never been so terrified in my life. As I stood mere inches from her, the stench from her body hit me like a wave of rot. My head drooped as I tried to control my fear. Slowly, I raised my gaze to meet hers. Her eyes were locked on me, unblinking. "You don't have to fight this, Ashley," she whispered. "Look at everyone else. See how happy they are. You could have that too. Just let go." That's when I felt it. The cool metal of the amulet pressing against my skin. My grandmother's amulet. She had always said it was a talisman, passed down through our family of gypsies with great healing powers, a safeguard against evil. she would often tell me. I'd worn it for years, a simple piece of my heritage, never fully understanding its power until now. My fingers instinctively closed around it, gripping it tightly as if it were my last lifeline. The moment I did, Ms. Alaric flinched. A look of discomfort passed across her face, her unnerving confidence faltering for the first time. Her eyes narrowed as she noticed the talisman. What is that?" she hissed, her voice no longer soothing but sharp and angry. I didn't know why, but I squeezed the amulet harder, feeling its warmth against my palm. Ms. Alaric winced again, and I could see her fingers trembling as she clutched her head. She staggered back a step as though an invisible force had struck her. "You don't control me," I said, my voice growing bolder as I took a step forward. Her eyes widened with fear, a fear I hadn't seen in her before. I ripped the necklace from my neck and brandished it in front of her, holding it up like a shield. Ms. Alaric recoiled, her once steady composure now crumbling. "No!" she shrieked, her voice filled with a primal panic. She stumbled to the floor, her body writhing in agony as tendrils of black smoke began to seep from her skin. They twisted and writhed, as though something dark and ancient was being torn from her very essence. Her pale, ghostly form convulsed on the floor, and I could hear the sickening sound of her bones cracking. The students behind her began to stir, their eyes blinking, coming back to themselves as if waking from a terrible dream. Uncle Henry's grip slackened, and he stumbled back in horror, realizing what he had done. Ms. Alaric's body continued to thrash until, finally, with a piercing scream, she collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Her skin shriveled and decayed, revealing the corpse of a woman who had clearly died decades ago. The hallway fell eerily silent. The students, once entranced by her, now looked around in confusion, dazed and frightened. Uncle Henry dropped to his knees beside his colleague's body, devastated by what he had done. His sobs echoed in the hall, a painful reminder of the horrors we had all endured. The police later searched Ms. Alaric's house. They uncovered fresh graves in the backyard, the bodies of the missing students, Matt, Jessica, and others buried beneath the soil. The story made headlines, a macabre sensation in our small town, but no explanation could ever truly capture the evil we had faced. I still have sleepless nights. Sometimes I wake, heart-pounding, expecting to see Ms. Alaric standing in the corner of my room, her cold eyes fixed on me. But even in those moments of terror, I clutch my grandmother's amulet and remind myself that it's over. For now, at least, it's over. I have learned to live with them by now. It is not much different from how things were before they came. I still have my routine. I still wake up at 6 a.m., and I most certainly still drag my feet to work every morning. All of us do. There is no alternative. When they first arrived, we at least had the decency to fear them. Quiet chatter at the water cooler and careful whispers in the hallway carried our unease. There was a shared anxiety, a collective tension, because we knew nothing. What are they? What do they want? Why are they not doing anything? Our little town quickly developed a system. At first, we communicated their whereabouts through hand-drawn maps and word of mouth. Soon, Facebook groups sprang up dedicated to this very purpose, and now, thanks to some local software engineers, we even have an app. Documenting the locations and behaviors of unwanted visitors, there's an app for that. Regarding these creatures, our knowledge is lacking, to say the least. But we've learned a few things. 1. They come in the night. From where? We don't know. There have been sightings of them crawling out of drain wells, jumping from rooftops and somehow squeezing themselves out of pipes. However, I can't confirm any of this firsthand. I've never seen them move. 2, once they find a spot, they seem to return to it every night. It's almost as if they enjoy things. Of course, this makes it easier to document their locations, but it has drawbacks too. For example, our next-door neighbors have a window in their bedroom that faces the complex courtyard. One of them took a liking to that very spot. Imagine trying to get ready for bed every night while one of those things stares at you with its small, black, beady eyes. Needless to say, our neighbors haven't opened their blinds in over a year. 3. The only thing they do is observe. If you encounter one, it won't move, it won't touch, threaten, or harm you. But it will watch you. As for why, we still have no idea. 4. They seem to be local to our town. I haven't heard of sightings anywhere else, and the only channel that covers them is our local news. The police department is aware of them, but they're the only authority that even acknowledges their existence. We've tried contacting every government agency imaginable. The FBI, CIA, Homeland Security. But no one has done anything, apart from silencing those of us who try to go public. We're on our own. That's the extent of what we know. As you might imagine, many theories have emerged. Most of them are biblical in nature or resemble fairy tales. Punishment for our sins, the rapture, that sort of thing. The most interesting theory I've heard suggests that they were once normal humans, sent by a foreign power to intimidate and destabilize us. But if you've ever seen one, you'd know immediately that they are not human. I still remember my first encounter. The first encounter anyone ever had. It was a foggy Thursday night, just past midnight. I'd stayed late at the office, finishing up a report that wasn't due for another week, but anything to avoid the silence of my apartment. The streets were deserted as I walked home, the dim glow of streetlights failing to cut through the mist. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a person, a shadow slouched against the wall of the laundromat. But as I got closer, my steps faltered. It was taller than a person should be, impossibly thin, like someone had stretched it. Its limbs were too long, dangling in strange angles as it hunched forward. It didn't seem to have a face, not really. Just smooth, pale skin that shimmered slightly in the light. And then there were the eyes, two small black beads, unmoving, unblinking, fixed directly on me. I froze, clutching my bag so tightly my knuckles turned white. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. It just watched. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that I was imagining things, that I was overtired. But the weight of its gaze was undeniable, like a heavy, oppressive presence pressing down on me. My heart thundered in my chest. I took a step backward, then another. Its head tilted ever so slightly as if studying me. I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned and bolted, sprinting the rest of the way home without looking back. I slammed my door shut, locked it, and collapsed against it, gasping for breath. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with all the lights on, waiting for morning. I kept telling myself I wouldn't go outside again. Not alone. Not at night. But life has a way of making you adapt. Bills pile up, groceries run low, and work doesn't wait for fear. So I learned to live with them, we all did. Now I see them often. Sometimes on my morning walk to work, standing silently in alleyways or perched on rooftops. Sometimes in the park, leaning against a tree as couples stroll by oblivious. I've even seen one sitting on a swing in the children's playground. Its long legs folded awkwardly, the chains creaking softly under its weight. But it's not just their presence that unnerves me. It's the feeling that they know something we don't. That their endless watching isn't idle curiosity, but something deliberate, something calculated. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever know what they want, or if we're better off not knowing at all. I've spent the last decade of my life working in a tribal jail. When I first started, I was told 5 rules I had to follow to survive. These rules weren't for handling inmates or dealing with life as a CO. They were for how to survive the paranormal. I thought it was all bullshit and superstition. I could not have been more wrong. The first thing I noticed about this facility, it borders the start of a dense, ominous forest. When I arrived for my interview, I stepped out of my car and looked at the trees and hills behind the facility. It looked like they went on forever. The view was serene, and if I didn't know better, I would have thought the buildings in front of me hosted retreats and camps. The razor wire, however, quickly ruined the illusion. After my interview, it took about 3 weeks before I got the call offering me the job. I came in for my orientation on a Wednesday. It was all the normal onboarding stuff. HR forms, uniform and equipment issuance, facility tour, meeting my supervisor, and getting my training schedule. I got assigned to the graveyard shift, working Friday, Monday from 2100 to 0700. Not the ideal schedule, but I was the newbie, can't really complain. I was told by the jail administrator, the warden if you will, that I was to report for my first day that Friday. I walked into the briefing room at 20:30 on the dot and took my seat. "Hey, you the new guy?" A deep, gravelly voice from in front of me said. "Yeah, that's me," I said. I looked up to see a man standing in front of me. He looked like he was in his mid-20s, about 6 feet even, and slim but well-built. Wore a plain black hat and had a nicely cropped beard. He looked at me with piercing green eyes, seemingly looking into my soul. "I'm Jay," I said. "I don't care," he said. "Once you're here for more than a month, then I'll care to learn your name." He then turned around and sat down in the chair in front of me. I looked around to see everyone else just talking and joking with each other like nothing had happened. "What the fuck was that about?" I whispered. "Don't mind Will, he's just tired of losing rookies," a soft voice to my left said. When I looked over, I saw a woman sitting next to me. "I'm Val. It's your first day, right?" she asked, extending her hand for a handshake. "Jay," I said. I shook her hand. If I had to guess, I'd say she was in her early 40s. Val was slender, had long brown hair styled into a tight bun. "Yeah, it's my first day. I had my orientation on Wednesday." "What did you do before this?" asked Val. "I worked security," I said. "Nice," said Val. "Have you worked graves before?" "Yeah, I actually was on graves before coming here, so hopefully the adjustment isn't too bad," I said. Val opened her mouth to reply, but cut herself off as we heard the door open and turned to see Corporal D walk in. Corporal D was an imposing figure, to say the least. He was 6 feet 5 inches and had to be at least 270 pounds. He wasn't pure muscle, but sure as hell wasn't fat. He had a look to him that gave the impression he was not someone to cross. "All right," he said with a deep, booming voice that commanded the attention of everyone in the room. "Here's what we got going on today." To give some insight, this is how a standard briefing goes. It usually starts with a general rundown of what happened on the prior shift. After that, the supervisor will typically give out the post assignments, followed by any special tasks or assignments if there is any. Most of the time, that's the end of it. The supervisor will ask if there are any questions, very rarely is there, and then dismisses us to go to the floor and start shift. Sometimes, though, there is some housekeeping that needs to be addressed. This could be anything from addressing issues to brief training on a new policy or procedure. That's how that briefing went. Nothing exciting happened on swing shift and no special assignments. There was, however, an issue to address. So to address the elephant in the room, "We have a rookie," announced Corporal D. "Officer J, stand up and introduce yourself." "Yes, sir," I said. I then rose from my seat and noticed everyone staring at me. Not sure of what exactly I was supposed to say, I managed to choke out, "Hi, everyone." I then attempted to sit back down before Corporal D stopped me, saying, "Tell us a little about yourself. Have you worked in a jail before? Have you worked graves before? Do you believe in ghosts?" I could almost see a sly smile on Corporal D's face. "I have not worked in a jail, let alone been in one before. I have spent the last year working graves doing security work. As for if I believe in ghosts," I laughed. "No, I don't believe in ghosts or ghouls or things that go bump in the night. I'm not a kid." I smiled until I noticed everyone's faces go from smiling to serious. Corporal D looked at me and said, "Oh, you will." He then looked back down at his papers. "All right then, everyone has their assignments. Officer J and Officer Will, stay behind. Everyone else, get to work." Everyone but Will and I stood up and left the room, not before a couple mocking somebody's in trouble comments. Once everyone left, the room was silent. Will was the first to speak. "What did I do this time?" Corporal D narrowed his eyes at Will before cracking a smile. "You kept bitching that the last rookie wasn't being trained right. Because they weren't. I spent half the time untraining the bullshit they learned working on day shift. That is why we lost him," Will said. Corporal D shot Will a look that reminded me of when your mom hears you swear. "Well, I talked to the brass and got them to try it your way this time." Will looked surprised. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Jay is fresh blood. He hasn't had any prior training. This is your opportunity to prove that your way of training works," Corporal D said. "However, if you fuck this up, we'll both be held responsible. Understood?" "Understood. Thank you for the opportunity, sir," Will said. "Jay, you will be attached to Will's hip. If he needs to shit, you help him wipe. Make sure you listen carefully to everything he teaches you. If you do that, then you'll turn out just fine," Corporal D said before putting a 3-ring binder on the table in front of me. "This binder contains every policy, procedure, and schedule you need to know. Consider this an extra limb during your training. If you don't have it with you every day, then you aren't ready for work. Read every page carefully. Memorize it," he said. Corporal D then leaned in close. "I mean it, Jay. Read every fucking word." "Yes, sir," I said. "I promise I won't let you down. I'll read it on my weekends if I have to." "I hope not. I have you and Will working general population tonight. Get acquainted and don't be afraid to ask questions, even the stupid ones. I can guarantee you can't ask anything more stupid than a lot of the questions inmates ask, he said. After that, Will and I walked out of the room. Is he always that serious? I asked. Who, Corporal D? Will chuckled. Nah, he just looks mean, but the guy's a teddy bear. It just takes a while for him to warm up to you. When we walked up to the entrance of H-Pod, I started to get nervous. Damn, it's nice out here, I said in an attempt to clear my head. Not even a breeze. Makes me wish I was at home to take it all in. Will looked at me and rolled his eyes. During my tour, I had only seen the unit for a brief moment, but now I'd be spending my first shift here. The door cycled and we walked into the officer station. The inmates refer to H-Pod as the fishbowl because of the way the building is laid out. When you first walk in, there's the officer station, a desk with a bunch of drawers filled with miscellaneous papers and hygiene supplies, a computer and phone. To the right, 1 house. Left, 2 house. And in front of the desk, 3 house. There are the 3 housing units with windows spanning the walls so the officer can see into the units from the officer station. Each unit is identical. A bathroom with shower stalls and toilets next to 2 rows of bunk beds, and spanning the width of the unit is the day room, consisting of a few bolted-down tables and chairs. On one wall of each unit is a phone and a video visit station. Each unit can hold roughly 25 inmates. The entrance door then began to cycle. So we gotta do a head count with the swing shift officer and get passed down, Will said as we walked through the door. Just as he said this, the radio chimed off. Attention in the facility. Formal head count is now in progress. Will and I proceeded into the officer station and placed our things on the desk. Holy shit, who the fuck let you in here? The shout came from the man sitting at the desk. Oh, sorry, I'm Schmidt. You must be Jay, right? Yeah, that's me, I said. Schmidt was an older, heavyweight man with a mustache. He was well kempt, but looked like he was a few years past retiring. Didn't know they made uniforms that big, Schmidt. Did the department have to special order it? Will said. Schmidt stood up and laughed. Fuck you, Will. Let's count so I can get the fuck out of here. Schmidt turned to me and asked, You do know how to count, right? Before I could answer, Will said, Of course he does. Will looked at me and said, Just take your boots off and use your fingers and toes if you get confused. The two laughed for a moment before we all walked to the first unit and counted. Once we finished counting the units, Schmidt sat back down at the computer. Will sat on the desk next to Schmidt and I stood off to the side. Anything to pass down? Will asked. Number ain't shit happened out here today, although 2 house has been pretty needy, replied Schmidt. There might be a few guys needing phone pins, but other than that, everyone is pretty much squared away. Just glad it's Friday, now I start the weekend. Any plans? Will asked. Aside from cleaning your mom's plumbing, no, joked Schmidt. Just plan on taking it easy and lounging around. I just saw her and she didn't mention having a plumbing, Will began to say before dropping his head laughing. Took you a minute there, didn't it? Laughed Schmidt. Brooke, sometimes you have to give Will a minute to process things. He's special. His mom told me that. Schmidt laughed, slapping Will on the leg. I chuckled to myself. So how do you know when it's time to leave? I asked. Just as the words left my mouth, the radio keyed up. Attention in the facility, formal head count is now clear. Almost immediately after the transmission, a different voice came over the radio. Swing shift, complete your pass down, clean up your area, finish any reports, and you're clear to go. I could feel Will and Schmidt looking at me. Never mind. Guess that answers my question, I said. Well, Will, looks like you finally found a trainee that's up to your speed, Schmidt said, laughing while patting Will on the shoulder. Jay, don't take it as if I'm picking on you. This is how we joke around here. It all comes from a good place. If anyone genuinely offends you, let them know, Schmidt said. And if anyone gives you shit, you let it fly right back at him. He grabbed his things and logged out of the computer. Stay safe tonight, guys. I'll see you later. Have a good weekend, you fat bastard, Will said. Later, I said. Schmidt then left. Well, it's just you and me, Rook, said Will. Grab your binder and find your login info for the computer. Let's make sure it works before Sergeant Wells leaves. I grabbed my binder and found my login info. Luckily, it worked. I then began to flip through the pages of the binder while the computer loaded up. Inside, I found the HR manual, facility policies and procedures, inmate handbook, and a weirdly discolored copied picture of uniform standards. I got to the back and found a single page titled 5 Rules Every Officer Must Follow to Survive Graveyard. It was photocopied and looked like the original was at least 15 to 20 years old. I took it out of the binder and held it up to Will. "Is this some kind of prank or something?" I asked. "Like some way of adding a little humor to the dry material?" Will looked down and saw what I was holding. His face dropped. "Oh, make no mistake, that is no joke. I will take care of the first check while you get settled, but I recommend you read those rules first." He stood up and walked towards one house. While Will did the cell check, I read the rules. Rule 1. Don't whistle at night. Rule 2. Take a partner when doing a perimeter check when possible. If you must do it solo, just look at the fence and walk as quickly as possible. Do not talk to the woman in the tree line. Rule 3. If an inmate says they saw a shadow with nobody attached to it, acknowledge them, then move on like nothing was said. If you see a shadow with nobody attached to it, just turn and walk away. Rule 4. If you hear your name but nobody is around, act like someone was there and shrug it off like you just missed them walking away. If you hear someone talking to you after shrugging it off, do not follow the voice, especially if you are outside. Rule 5. If you see them and show fear you're already a goner, just go with them and don't try to bring anyone else with you. This has to be a fucking joke. There's no way it's not, I said. I set the paper down and leaned back in the chair. It's not a joke and it is real, Will said as he walked by me. We'll talk more about it when I'm done with the check. Finish logging onto the computer. Will then opened the door of 2 house and walked inside. I finished setting up my profile and waited for Will. I looked over towards one house and looked into the window. I could see the light from the setting sun on the wall. Most of the inmates were already in bed. I heard the sound of someone tapping on the window behind me. "What's up?" I yelled before I turned around to see nobody there. I expected to see someone standing at the entrance door, waiting for it to cycle so they could come in. I expected something. I brushed it off as a mixture of the wind and my senses being heightened after reading the rules. After another couple minutes, Will returned, having completed the check. "Hey, you got logged in. Awesome. There's been too many times where rookies' login just didn't work. Usually it's from the Sergeant Fat fingering the keys and adding an extra character. Just pull up the logs and find the tab titled Cell Check. From there, just type HPOD Cell Check Complete and hit Save," said Will. I did as he said, and we sat in silence for a moment. "So are you going to explain how the rules aren't actually bullshit?" I asked. Will sighed and sat back on a chair he found in the storage closet. "Do you really not believe in the paranormal?" I really don't. Every time I've heard anyone tell me a story of their experiences, it's always been explainable in one way or another," I said. "Have you ever experienced anything you couldn't readily explain?" Will asked. "Honestly, no, I haven't. I've never seen a shadow moving on its own or heard a disembodied voice or heard something only to see nothing there. It's not like I'm closed off to the idea of it. I just haven't experienced anything that has definitively proven it to me, and I'm not about to go searching for it either," I explained. Will eyed me curiously. I could tell he was trying to read me, and I don't blame him. I was doing the same to him when he talked. "So you didn't hear the woman tapping on the entrance door window?" Will asked. "You mean when the wind? It must have blown something at the door or something," I said. "You know damn well there's no wind," Will said. "Wasn't it you who pointed out how there wasn't even a breeze earlier?" "Yeah, I said that, but it's been a while since we were out there," I said. I then turned to face the door and looked at the treetops in the distance. After a minute of staring at the trees and not seeing them move even in the slightest, I turned back to Will. "It could have been a random breeze that popped up and blew something." "Yeah, sure," Will said, a tinge of annoyance in his voice. He turned his chair to face me and leaned forward, looking me in the eyes. "Listen, I've been working here for about 3 years now. For the last year, I've been a trainer. In that time, I have had a hand in training about 10 rookies. Each one of them started on day shift and were sent to me after a month or 2. You are the first I have gotten fresh. I will say this one time. If you listen to me and follow what I teach you to the letter, you will survive." I could see a mixture of passion and pleading desperation in Will's eyes when he said that to me. "How many of the rookies you've trained are still here?" I asked. Will sat back in his chair and sighed. After a moment of silence, Will said, "About 5. 5? I yelled. "How the fuck did half of the rookies you've trained quit?" "I never said they quit," Will said. "Then what happened to them?" I asked. Will looked at the computer before saying, "They didn't follow the rules." Will's voice was solemn, and I could tell he wasn't telling me everything. "Listen, you aren't ready for those stories. It's your first night. We'll get into that later. For now, focus on learning the job, and when you are ready, I'll tell you. You can't just drop this on me and then tell me I'm not ready and move on, I said. How am I supposed to not make the same mistakes as those 5 if I don't know what they did? Will scowled at me, his tone changed from helpful to serious. All you need to know right now is that they didn't follow the rules. Will stood up and looked down at me. Drop it, I'm serious. Learn the rules and follow them. He barked before turning and walking into the bathroom. Yes, sir, I said as he walked away. I was curious about what happened, but knew better than to press it on my first day. As I sat at the desk, I could hear the sounds of snoring and toilets flushing in the units. I opened the binder and put the sheet with the 5 rules back in its place. I skimmed through the employee manual when I heard the bathroom door open. Hey, Rook, it's time for a check, let's go, Will said. Just like with head count, follow behind me. We then walked through the first unit. Once inside, I heard the door close behind me and I quickly caught up with Will, who was a few feet in front. We walked down the aisles, and as we were going into the bathroom, I heard what sounded like the unit door cycling. I looked at Will, who shrugged and kept walking. When we went to exit the unit, the door was secured. We exited and finished the rest of the cell check. As the night went on, that's how it went. We'd do a cell check and sit back down and talk about the job. Will would explain how to do certain things and what he has found works for him and what he sees works for others. Sometime around 0500, Will sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. I think we've gone over enough work-related BS for the night. Why'd you take this job? Will said. Honestly? I said, I needed the money. Will laughed. At least you're honest. Most guys spout off some bullshit about helping the community or want to make a difference. Some of them really did mean it, but the majority of us just needed a job or needed to make more money. I was kind of taken aback. Here I thought I took this job for selfish reasons and assumed everyone here wanted to be a part of the change. It was a little bit of a confidence booster knowing this. I think Will could see this on my face. In the end, it doesn't matter what brought you here. At the end of the day, you showed up. In my book, there's no selfish or noble reason to work in this field. There's showing up and doing the job, and there's showing up and then bailing. That definitely helps my psyche a little, not gonna lie, I said. When I started working security, everyone had the same precedent for taking the job. The money wasn't good by any stretch of the imagination, but it was there. Will chuckled. Yeah, that sounds about right. Security is shit work and even shittier pay. He looked back up towards the ceiling and asked, So what did your friends and family say about it? I sighed and looked down at the desk. Well, my friends said I was crazy. My mother-in-law, however, said that I would make a terrible officer. And your wife? He asked. She didn't say much, but I could tell she's worried, I said. She'll be fine. Fuck your mother-in-law for saying that, though, Will said. We both laughed before doing another check. When we got back to the desk, I asked Will, So what about you? Well, I took the job because I needed one, he said. Why'd you stay? I asked. I stayed because I fell in love with it. I love the people I've worked with. The pay ain't bad either, Will said, nudging me with his elbow. After about an hour, Will and I were sitting at the desk. While I was reading over the set of 5 rules, I heard a loud yell saying, Help me, followed by incoherent screaming coming from outside. It sounded like a female voice. What the fuck was that? I said. You heard that too? Will asked. Hang on. Will reached for the phone and called control. Hey, are you guys having fun without us? He paused for a second. We just heard someone screaming help me from outside. I thought it was someone fucking around and finding out. You sure you didn't hear it? His face went pale. Yes, I know the rules, just let me know if anything comes of it. Will then turned towards me. They don't know what the fuck that was. From right at the H-pod entrance door, we could hear tapping. J-A-J-J-J, a female voice was chanting my name at the door. Hey, help me, Jay. I looked at Will, who was frozen staring at the computer screen. Remember the rules. Act like it's not happening and just stare straight ahead. Will said. Fucking help me, Jay, the voice screamed. The door began to shake violently and the taps turned to booming thuds. Jay, I know you can hear me, I can see you shaking. The thuds grew faster and began to take on this wet sound, almost like whatever was hitting the door was bleeding. You fucking coward, Jay. They will eat your eyes and fuck the holes left behind. When he is done with you, you'll wish you went to hell. One more loud, shrill scream came from the door before it was silent again. "Well, what was that?" I said shakily. My whole body was trembling. "Please tell me this is some kind of sick hazing tradition," I begged. Will shushed me and whispered, "Shut the fuck up." After what felt like eternity, but was only about 5 minutes, Will looked at me. His eyes were misty and it sounded like I could almost hear him sniffle. "Have you ever been here before?" he asked. "Number outside of my interview and orientation, this is my first time here. I'm not even from this area," I said. "Can you please explain what the fuck that was about?" That was something I have not experienced in a few months. I've experienced her several times over the years, and no matter how it goes, you never get used to it. Will said, "We've taken to calling her Banshee. Now if that's what she is, I don't know, nor do I care to find out." "How did she know my name?" I asked. We both were looking dead ahead still. "Nobody knows how any of them know anything about us, but they do," Will said. "So what do we do from here?" I asked. We sat in silence for a moment before Will shook his head and said, "I'll report it to Corporal D and let you know what he says." Will stood up and looked at the time. "Let's do a check real quick and then I'll see if Corporal D will come out here for a minute." I stood up and panned my eyes from 3 house to the entrance and exit doors. That's when I saw it. Will," I said. "What's up?" he asked. "Look," I said, pointing at the entrance door window. "Well, that's new," Will said. We both stared at the door and saw written in blood on the window the words, "Jay, help me." "Let's do this check real quick," Will said. "The quicker we finish it, the quicker I can talk to D." There were only a couple of inmates up when we did our check in one house. "Hey, CO, can you tell that bitch outside to shut the fuck up? We trying to sleep in here and she woke a few of us up." One inmate said, "Yeah, the guys inside are dealing with it, sorry man, caught us off guard too." Will said, "You guys hear anything before the screaming?" An inmate that was laying on a bunk along the wall facing outside sat up and looked at us. "Yeah, I heard scratching on the wall for about 20 minutes or so before the yelling happened," he said. "Anything else?" I asked. "Actually, yeah," the first inmate said. "It looked like someone was looking in the window before we heard the scratching sounds." Will pointed at the window on the wall. "That window?" he asked. "Yeah," the inmate replied. "That window is at least 9 feet off the ground," Will said. The room went silent. Nobody said anything else after that. Will and I continued our check. None of the other units reported hearing anything. We returned to the desk and Will called Corporal D. "Hey, Corporal, can you come out here for a minute? Got something you need to see," Will said. Right as he hung up the phone, we both looked at the door again. "Holy shit," I said. The writing was gone. We both approached the door and looked at the glass of the window. "No sign of it being cleaned off," I pointed out. "Yeah, no sign of rain either. What the fuck, man?" Will said. I could tell he was frustrated. He quickly returned to the desk and called Corporal D again. "Hey, instead of coming out here right away, I need you to review cameras," Will requested. "Yeah, the entrance door between 0500 and 0520. Tell me if anyone approached it or cleaned the window." "Hey, Will," I said. I gave the window a further inspection. What I initially saw gave me the chills. The same layer of dust was on the window with no signs of anybody touching it at all, let alone signs of someone writing on it and then cleaning it off. "What's up, Jay?" Will said. I turned to look at Will. When I made eye contact with him, his eyes went wide. "Doesn't look like..." I froze when I saw his expression. "What?" Will didn't say a word but pointed back at the window. When I turned back around, I saw it. What the actual fuck? There wasn't anyone on the other side of the door, but something was writing on the window. "Jay" was the first word finished. It took a minute, but we both watched as the words were written. "Jay, will, die." When I looked closer, it was unmistakable. It was written in blood. Just then the phone rang. Will picked it up. "H-Pod, Officer Will." I walked back to the desk. Though I couldn't make out what the voice on the other end was saying, it sounded panicked. Will's face went pale. "Understood. I'll let him know." He hung up the phone and looked back at the window. "We haven't experienced this before. Unexplained knocks, shadows moving, disembodied voices, sure. But this..." Will paused. "I haven't seen writing inside the fence before." "What do you mean by inside the fence?" I asked. "Most of those rules are for when you're out on a perimeter check. I've seen my fair share of weird and unexplainable shit here, but nothing like this, Will said, not taking his eyes off of the window. He composed himself and looked back at me. So a bit of bad news. I can promise you nothing is worse than seeing your name written in blood 2 different times, I joked. Well, we are going to have to stay behind for a debrief with Corporal D, Will said. Just then I saw a flash of light come from outside the door. Once my eyes readjusted, I could see Corporal D standing there with a camera. Holy shit. I've heard stories from back in the day when this would happen, but they always said the evidence disappeared before they could collect evidence, Corporal D said while he was walking through the door. He pulled out a collection kit and took a sample of the blood. Hopefully this comes back with something. Maybe then we can get some answers. What do you mean answers? I asked. Need to know basis, Rook, Will said. And trust me when I say, you probably don't want to know. Corporal D laughed. Will's right, kid. If you need to know, you'll get an update. Corporal D walked up to the desk and saw I had the rules sitting on top of my binder. Oh, good. You're learning the rules. He looked at me with a grin. So you still not believe in ghosts? I can confidently say I am not sure at all anymore, I said smugly. Listen here, smartass, Corporal D said. Let's see if that opinion changes. He looked at Will now. I'm gonna steal your rookie for a little bit. Will looked at Corporal D, then at me and said, Sounds like a plan, sir. I then followed Corporal D up to control. What's going on, sir? I asked. I grimaced as the words left my mouth, realizing I should just keep my mouth shut. You'll see, he replied. When we got to control, I could see the camera viewing H-Pod was up on one of the screens and it was paused at 0455. Have a seat, Corporal D commanded. I sat down and watched the screen as Corporal D hit play. I watched as Will and I could be seen at the desk and all the inmates in the units were sleeping save for 1 or 2. After a minute of nothing, I saw it. There was a dark shadow-like mist that formed just outside the wall to one house. It morphed into a humanoid form and appeared to climb the wall before seemingly peering into the window of one house. It then disappeared before reappearing outside the entrance door. What the fuck? I said. Just then I could hear the screaming and yelling. The shadow appeared to slightly lose shape with each scream. The camera switched to the interior view. I could hear the tapping on the glass. It switched back to the view with the shadow. Then it happened, the door bowed with each bang. I watched as red blotches appeared on the glass of the window. Then, silence. I looked closely in disbelief. No fucking way. The shadow reached an arm up to the window and began to write. But from the camera, it was different. I could have sworn it wrote, Jay, help me, but when I looked at the footage, it had changed. It said, you could have stopped this, Will. The shadow disappeared right after the writing stopped. That's weird, I said, confused. What do you mean? Corporal D asked. When we first saw it, the writing said, Jay, help me, not that, I said. Corporal D looked shocked. He quickly picked up the phone and called Will. Hey, Will, what did the writing on the window say the first time, not the one I got a picture of? Corporal D looked back at me. I was still watching the footage. Will and I got up and did our check and the writing just vanished. I looked back to the camera that viewed the desk. It was then that Corporal D's words rang in my head. Oh, good. You're learning the rules. I remember putting that paper back into the binder. Actually, I know that I did. I watched as the shadow appeared at the desk. Corporal? He snapped his attention to me. You may want to see this. He hung up the phone and we both watched as the shadow opened my binder and took out the paper with the rules on it and placed it on the desk. Wow, Corporal D said. We continued to watch as the shadow disappeared again. Corporal D switched the camera back to the view of the door. The shadow didn't reappear this time, but the words, J will die, spelled themselves out on the window. And now we are all caught up, he said. What did Will say was written the first time? I asked. Same shit you said, he replied. So let me ask you again. I cut him off. Yeah, I'd say it's safe to say I believe now. Corporal D laughed and patted me on the shoulder. Didn't think something would happen this soon. Sorry you had to go through this on your first night. He said, just get back to your post and tell Will there's no need for a debrief after shift. Thank you, sir. I will deliver the message, I said, standing up. As I walked out of the room, Corporal D told me, Oh, and Jay, don't quit on us now. Sir, I said with a smile, I quite literally can't afford to. So I guess I better get used to this kind of shit. When I got back to H-Pod, Will was sitting at the desk. "How'd it go?" he asked. "You definitely need to see that footage," I said. "Oh, I plan on it." Will laughed. "Hey, when the daywalkers get here, we'll leave this out of our pass-down. They don't understand, and I don't feel like explaining my sanity." I just nodded my head in agreement. The sun began to rise, and the day shift officer arrived, and we did head count. Once we finished telling him how nothing happened, we left. As we walked out of the facility, I couldn't shake this feeling that I was being followed. When I got into my car and looked out the windshield, I thought I saw a woman standing in the tree line, staring right at me. Remembering Rule 2, I turned my car on and drove home. About 3 months after my first shift, I was all trained up. I was posted as a roamer for my first solo shift. I say solo because I wasn't actually on my own, technically. When you are posted as a roamer, you have a partner. When I was in training, I was always with Will, so technically I was his partner. This is because, as the rules state, you have to bring a partner with you whenever you do a perimeter check or go outside the fence line. My partner that night was Val. Outside of our brief interaction on my first night, I hadn't worked with Val all that much. She was nice and very helpful. We all joked that Val was the mom of the shift. When I got hurt, only minor scratches after a fight with a drunk guy that was being booked in, she was the first one to yell at me for not going to see the nurse afterwards. I'm sure that if it wouldn't have gotten her in trouble, she would have dragged me by ear to the medical office. "So Jay, how are you liking the job so far?" she asked. We were walking in from briefing together after getting our special assignment for the night. "Good. Aside from all the annoying questions the inmates ask, I think I'm starting to get it," I said. "I got a question for you." "What's up?" Val asked. "So Corporal D said that both Days and Swings reported outside calls coming in, reporting a woman spotted in the woods just outside the perimeter," I said. "Is this something that happens often?" We stopped walking and Val looked at me for a moment. "Kinda." She said, "We get calls about hikers or hunters or hell, sometimes groups of teenagers hanging out in the forest all the time. This isn't something too out of the ordinary." She sounded like she was choosing her words carefully. I looked at Val and could see something was bothering her. Corporal D had the two of us stay after everyone else. Our special assignment was that we had to do a perimeter check once an hour. Normally there's only 2 to 3 perimeter checks done per shift, once at the start of the shift and once towards the end of the shift, and if nothing is going on, once in the middle of the shift. That night we'd be doing 5 times as much as normal. The assignment didn't end with that, however. We technically have 4 perimeters. There's the interior perimeter, which is everything inside the interior fence, the fence that lines the yard. Then there's the space in between the outer perimeter fence and the yard fence. We call this area no man's land, since it's not used for anything other than emergency evacuation meeting points and access to maintenance closets. After that, you have the exterior perimeter. This refers to everything outside the fence that encompasses the entire facility. Normally, when we do a perimeter check, we start with an interior perimeter check. This is done by checking the recreation yard and interior fence, making sure the fence has no signs of damage or tampering, and checking the entire yard for contraband and/or hazards. When we do an exterior perimeter check, we ensure the exterior fence is intact and check for any possible contraband stashed outside. Usually these are the only checks done, but we were tasked with checking the 4th perimeter once every 2 hours as well. This is a fence that is about 100 feet into the tree line. It serves as a barrier separating the outer perimeter of the facility from the residential area, about 3/4 of a mile behind the tree line. Unlike the interior and exterior fence, this one doesn't encompass the property. Instead, it's in a L shape and is only about 1,000 feet long in total. It is only accessible on foot through roughly carved trails that line the fence. During daylight hours, it's a beautiful hike through the forest. When the sun is out, the thick tree canopy provides a pleasant balance between shade and visibility. Don't get me wrong, the forest surrounding the jail has an eerie feeling to it. Regardless of the time, you always feel like you're being watched or followed. At night, it's straight out of a horror movie. Without a bright flashlight, it's impossible to navigate since the thick tree canopy blocks any ambient moonlight. During my training, Will only showed me this fence one time, and that was when the sun was out. "Hey, you okay?" I asked. "Yeah, why?" she replied. Val was normally very chipper and talkative, but after hearing what our assignment was, she was acting off. "Just seems like this assignment is bothering you. Normally you'd be talking my ear off about the weekend, but you haven't said much since briefing," I said. "I'm fine," Val said. Her tone was uncharacteristically short. The door into the facility slid open with a metallic clang like it always does. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Val flinch with the clang. "I'm going to set my shit down and check out my gear from control," I said. "I'll meet you in the yard at 21:30 and we can start the first check." "Sounds good," she said. I went to the control room and checked out my radio, the keys to the personnel gates in the fences, and a flashlight. Corporal D handed me a different flashlight than normal. Usually, we get issued a generic run-of-the-mill flashlight, nothing special to it, just bright enough to see in the dark areas of a unit without waking the inmates. This one was a big fuck you flashlight. The bulb was at least 6 inches around and it was about a foot long. On the side of it read 100,000 lumens LED in white lettering. "Whoa, this thing is fucking huge," I said. "Yeah, we ordered that a couple months ago for perimeter checks and it arrived earlier today," Corporal D said. I turned it on in the admin office and it lit up the room like it was daylight. "I think it should be sufficient for tonight, just don't lose it." "Well, as long as it lights the way, it'll work," I said. "I'll let you know how it works when I get back from this check. Hell, if you got nothing going on later, maybe you'll join us for a check and see it in action." "We'll see," he said. I turned and walked out of the room. After I secured the control door behind me, I turned to see Will standing in the hallway. "Hey Will, what's up?" I asked. Will opened the door to the attorney visit room, a small room with no cameras for attorney-client privilege. Supervisors would pull you into this room to have unpleasant conversations. Officers, however, would use this room to talk without people eavesdropping. So when Will motioned for me to step in the room with him, I knew something was wrong. "Jay, we need to talk," he said, making sure the door was closed. "You remember how on your first night, you asked me about the 5 rookies I lost?" he asked. "Yeah, I remember you telling me that I wasn't ready," I said. "Why?" "Val told me about your guy's assignment tonight and what Corporal D reported sparked it," he said. "Before you start these checks, you need to know something." "What are you trying to say?" I asked. "You're ready, Jay," Will said. My demeanor changed from nervous to excited, and I smiled ear to ear. "Don't let it go to your head. This isn't a good thing, but it is something you need to know." My smile vanished. "Oh shit, is it that bad?" I asked. "Let me start from the beginning and you can make the determination after that," he said. We both sat down at the table across from each other. "About 2.5 years ago, I was in your shoes. I was let loose on my own and it was going great." Will was staring down at his clasped hands that were resting on the table. "That was until another rookie, Ryan, I got hired on with, and I was tasked with checking in on a report of some kids running around in the trees on the perimeter. It was dusk and the air was still. We radioed in that we were beginning our check. It took us about 10 minutes to reach the closest corner of the fence behind the tree line because we were joking around and horseplaying. By the time we got to the fence, it was dark, like nighttime level dark. When I looked behind us out to the trail we came in on, I could see the sunlight still. It was like being 2 hours ahead of everyone else. We pulled out our flashlights and pushed on. After about a minute of walking, Ryan stopped. I could see he had squatted down and was looking at the ground in front of him. Will paused for a minute and looked up at me. I could see on his face that he was searching for the words. "What's rule number 1, Jay?" "Don't whistle at night," I said. When I saw what he was looking at, I froze. There were dozens of child-sized footprints in the dirt. Ryan stood up and we both heard a whistle. It sounded like when someone tries to mock a bird call. We looked at each other. "That sounded close," Ryan said. I shined my flashlight around, looking for the source of the whistle. After not seeing anything, we agreed to push forward. We heard it again. This time we could tell it was coming from the left. Ryan shined his light to the left and I kept looking straight ahead. Again, we couldn't find it and kept moving. There was another whistle, this time from the right. Same as before, we didn't see shit. Will looked back down at his hands. "You know what I didn't realize until after everything?" "What?" I asked. "Aside from the whistling, there were no other sounds. Not even the sounds of our footsteps," he said. "How is that possible?" I asked. "No clue, but out there, you're in their world, and the rules of our world don't seem to apply." Will looked back up at me. After that last whistle, Ryan turned to me and said, "I'm going to try whistling back." I told him that was a stupid idea and pleaded with him not to, but he did it anyway. "What happened?" I asked. "It was silent for a second after," Will said. "Then all hell broke loose. We heard running close by, but in all directions. I could tell we were being circled. The steps were so quick it sounded like a low hum. Ryan turned to face me and began to back up. "Rule number 5, Will, I'm not taking you down with me." I could hear the running getting farther away from me as he backed up. "What did you do?" I asked. "I was frozen in place. I tried moving, but it was like something was holding me in place," he said. That's when I heard it. Will sighed, then stood up. A voice inside my head. All it said was, "He's ours now." Then silence. When I was finally able to move, I moved my light around trying to find Ryan. There were no footprints on the ground in front of me where Ryan was. I couldn't bring myself to push forward, so I backtracked. While I was walking back to where we entered, I noticed something. Will leaned back against the wall. There was only one set of footprints on the trail. I can't explain it, not then and not now. When I came out of the trail, it was pitch black outside. I saw 2 people walking on the perimeter road with flashlights shining at me. "Will, that you?" one of them asked. When they got closer, I saw it was Corporal D. He was still an officer back then. They walked me back inside, and that's when I found out it was midnight. When Ryan and I walked out there, it was 2000. We had been gone for 4 hours, but it only felt like 30 minutes. They asked about Ryan, but all I could say was they took him. Will stepped up to the table and leaned in close to me. "Remember the rules and follow them, Jay. 3 of the 5 rookies I was talking about all fell to the same fate. Learn from them, from me." "I won't, Will, I promise," I said. He nodded at me and we walked out of the room. When I looked at my watch, I saw it was 21:30. Shit, I gotta go meet up with Val in the yard. It's time for the first check. I split away from Will and began to walk out towards the yard. "Stay safe. Let me know how it goes if you come back," Will said with a smirk. When I got through the door leading out to the yard, Val was already checking the fence. "Look who decided to show up," she yelled. I radioed to control that we were beginning the interior check and caught up with Val. "Sorry, I was talking to Will," I said. We finished with the interior check and I keyed into the personnel gate. "So, he told you about Ryan?" she asked. I swung the gate open and we walked into no man's land. I called in the end of the first check and the start of the second. "Yeah," I whispered. "You okay?" she asked. I locked the gate back up and we began to walk along the interior fence. "I know it's a lot to take in, but don't let it get to your head. I need you on your shit tonight." "I'm good, I promise," I said. I started to get this feeling of being watched the closer we got to the tree line. I turned on the flashlight and shined it at the exterior fence. Holy shit, Corporal D wasn't kidding. This thing is like having sunlight in your hand. "No kidding, it's almost too bright," she said. Val was right. When I pointed the light at the chain-link fence, it reflected off the metal almost to the point of not being able to see past the fence. We walked in silence for a couple minutes before I was frozen in my tracks. I heard what almost sounded like whispering coming from just beyond the fence. "Did you say something?" I asked. "No, why?" asked Val. She stopped a few steps ahead of me before turning around. "Could have sworn I heard someone talking," I said. "Let's keep going." "Yeah, the quicker we can get back inside the better. I'll keep an ear out," she said. While we were walking, I could hear the wind blowing through the trees and crickets chirping in the bushes. Once we finished the second check and walked through the last gate and out the exterior fence, all the sounds vanished. It was like walking through a portal. I radioed control that we were starting the final 2 checks and we started walking. After about 2 minutes of silence, I looked at Val. "You hear that?" "No, what are you—" She stopped herself mid-sentence. "What the fuck?" "Yeah, I know." When we stopped walking, I noticed that we had finished the exterior check. "I know this is probably the last thing you want to hear, but all we have left is the back fence." I looked at my watch to make note of the time. It was 21:45. I turned my flashlight to the tree line, and about 15 feet in front of us was the trailhead. "Fuck it," I sighed before radioing to control that we were entering the trail. "Let's get this over with," she said. We entered the trailhead, and I kept the light pointing straight ahead. Even with how bright the light seemed outside the trail, we could only see about 10 feet in front of us. It was like there was a black sheet being held up at the end of the beam. As we walked along the trail, my eyes kept panning to the ground, looking out for the little footprints Will told me about. But there was nothing there. "What's that?" I said, as I saw an orange landscaping flag on the ground. Written on the flag was confirmation code 36021. I had Val write down the code. "Let's leave this here. Something tells me taking anything from here is a bad idea. No argument here. Wonder why it's here, though. I've been through here a bunch of times and have never seen it before, Val said. Looks fairly new. I'll ask Dee about it when we get back. We continued walking until we popped out of the trees at the other end of the trail about 20 minutes later. Well, that was uneventful, I said. Don't get cocky, we still have more of those checks ahead of us, Val said. What time is it? I looked at my watch. Strange, I said. My watch says 21:45. How is that possible? Val asked. We were walking for at least a half hour. I radioed control that we were done with the final check and that we were heading back in. Val, switch to channel 3 on your radios. Corporal D's voice came through. I looked at Val, shrugged, and we both turned our radios to channel 3. Radio check, I said. Val radio check, she said. Good copy on both. Corporal D replied, You guys actually need to do your check. Corporal, we did. We've been walking for like half an hour, Val said. There's no way. Just radioed saying you just got to the trailhead. I know you might not want to be out there, but... Corporal D cut himself off. If you aren't lying, do you have anything to report? Yes, sir, I found an orange landscaping flag, I said. An orange landscaping flag? He asked. Anything special about it? We have contractors that leave them behind all the time. Written on it was confirmation code 36021, I replied. There was a long pause before the radio keyed up again. Go back to channel 1 and meet me in control, Corporal D said. We switched out radios back and checked in with control before heading back into the facility. When we got to control, Corporal D was sitting at his desk. I need to know exactly what happened on that trail. We entered the trailhead and just kept walking. About halfway through, I saw the flag and had Val write down the number. We walked for another 10 to 15 minutes before we exited the other end of the trail, I said. Corporal D paused for a moment. And there was nothing else to report? No strange sounds or anything out of place? No, we didn't see anything and it was dead silent. That was the only weird thing, Val said. There was no ambient noise at all. Only thing I heard was our footsteps. And you, Jay? He asked. Same, aside from the flag, I didn't see or hear anything. I replied. Okay, well, you got another check coming up here soon. Luckily for you, it's only the exterior check, Corporal D said. Since the report was about the forest, you don't need to worry about either of the interior checks the rest of the night. Sounds good, Val said. Sir, why was that flag there? I asked. I put that there about a month ago. Got word that one of the day shift guys was being accused of falsifying his early morning checks. He explained. If an officer takes too long for the check or finishes it too quickly, the code lets the supervisor on duty know if the check was legit or not. Does this happen often? I asked. It started to become a frequent thing about 3 months ago, he said. Corporal D turned around. Taking the hint that the conversation was over, I turned around and started to leave control. Let me know if you need anything else, I said. When I walked into the hallway outside of control, I saw Val talking to Will. Jay, you good? Will asked. A little weirded out, but overall I'm good, I said. Jay, are you sure? Val asked. You seemed shook up when you were talking to Dee. Val was back to her normal self and was now in mom mode. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what's with all the secrecy, I said. Will put his hand on my shoulder. Some things are better unknown. If it was important for you to know, they'd tell you. Do you know? I asked. Some of it, but they compartmentalize a lot of it. Will patted me on the back and shot me a smile. Don't think about it too much, you got a long night ahead of you. Yeah, I guess you're right, I said. I looked at the time and it was already time for the next check. Val, it's time. Val gave me a nod and turned back towards Will. See you on the other side, she said. Stay safe, he said. I gave Will a fist bump. We'll try. With that, Val and I walked outside. You want to call it in? Yeah, I got it, Val said. She pulled out her radio and notified control that the check was starting. Check your watch, make sure it's working. We both checked our watches. I got 2,215. You? I asked. Same, she said. Well, let's get to it. We started walking. As I turned on the flashlight, I checked the battery indicator. Damn, this thing has one hell of a battery. It's got this little screen that shows how long the battery will last, and it changes based on the brightness selected. I held up the flashlight to show Val. Says at full brightness it should last us about 4 hours. Well, that's good, she said. We took the first corner and walked along the fence. As I was panning the flashlight from the fence to the trees, I thought I saw movement about 250 feet ahead behind some bushes. Hang on, did you see that? I asked. Val stopped next to me and looked where I was shining the light. Must have been a deer. Well, we're heading that way. I didn't get a good look at whatever it was, I said. When we got to where the bushes I saw movement behind, I stopped and looked around. I'm going to check behind the bush and see if I see anything. Don't go too far, Jay, she said. I got behind the bush and saw the grass behind it had been pushed down as if someone had just walked through there. Looks like somebody recently walked through here, I said. I knelt down and could see a set of footprints. Well, there was someone here. Looks like they were barefoot too. Val winced as I said it. How big are the prints? I knew what she was getting at. Looks to be adult-sized. Small but too big to be a child. Just then I heard a scream. What was that? I asked. Get out of there, I can't see anything without the light, said Val. I was making my way back towards Val when we heard another scream. Something wasn't right about it. It didn't sound human. I've seen videos of cougar calls sounding like a woman screaming, but this didn't sound like that either. Val, I said, did something seem off about those screams? When I looked at Val, she was crying. Let's get the fuck out of here, Jay. Yeah, okay, I said. I patted Val on her back. Let's go. We finished up our check. There were more screams while we walked, but with each one we walked faster. By the end of the check, we were almost in a dead sprint. Sorry, Val whispered to me. Don't be, I said. I radioed to control that we had finished the check and were coming back inside. Are you okay? I asked. When we came in, we walked through the officer's wing. This was the side of the facility that had some admin offices, the break room, workout area. Nothing fancy, just some dumbbells and one of those workout machines you would normally see in a hotel gym. Briefing room, conference room, and 2 locker rooms, 1 male, 1 female. I'll be fine, she said. I just need a minute. Val walked into the women's locker room and I walked back into the facility. Right as the door closed behind me, Will was already walking towards me. Where's Val? He asked. In the locker room, crying, I said. I was interrupted by Officer Smith, an immature asshole who needs no further description. What, you show her your dick out there? He laughed. I'd cry too. Smith, shut the fuck up, Will barked. Geez, was just fucking around, Smith said. Thankfully, he walked off. Maybe it was Will's face turning red, a key sign that he's royally pissed. Or maybe it was my please let today be the day look, but he was gone. Fuck that asshole, I said. As I was saying, it was a rough check. Yeah, I could hear the screaming when I stepped outside for some air, Will said. My eyes widened. You heard it? I asked. I counted 5. Were there more? He asked. Yeah, about 10 in total, I said. Anything sound weird about them to you? Uh-huh, Will nodded. Haven't heard anything like it before. Definitely not human, didn't sound like any animal I've ever heard either. It almost sounded like something trying to mimic someone screaming, I said. Will looked at me with wide eyes like I had found the missing piece of the puzzle. What? Like when we heard that woman screaming your name a couple months back? He asked. Then it clicked. It was the same scream we heard right before my name. Holy shit, I said. I need to... Just then, Val walked up to us. Need to what? She asked. Go back out, I answered. Whatever made that scream is the same thing that scared the shit out of me on my first night. Val looked at Will. Can you go with him? I can't go back out there. If the corporal approves it, Will said. You okay, Val? I asked. Val looked at the ground for a moment, then at me. Yeah, I'm good now. I just can't go back out there. Jay, Val, come here. I heard from behind me. I turned around to see Corporal D standing in the hallway. Val and I looked at each other, then at Will. Will shrugged and walked away. What happened out there? Asked Corporal D. Everything was fine until I thought I saw movement behind a bush. I answered. When I checked it out, I saw adult-sized footprints. Then we heard screaming but could not find the source. Yeah, I heard it too. Was I seeing things, or were you two in almost a dead sprint towards the last stretch of the perimeter? He asked. We were, Val said. I told Jay we needed to leave and we started walking. That was until we heard more screaming. Jay looked around, but each scream seemed to come from a different direction. That's when we started running. I didn't even think of it until then, but she was right. Each scream after the first came from a different direction. "You guys okay?" he asked. We both nodded yes, and Corporal D paused for a moment. "Good. You guys have a few before the next check?" Val looked at her watch and her jaw dropped. "Jay, what time do you have?" she asked. 2245, I answered. Then it hit me we had been gone for over 30 minutes. "Corporal, what time do you have?" I asked. Corporal D looked confused and checked his phone. 2245, same as you. "Why?" I could see on his face that right after the words left his mouth, it clicked for him too. Fucking hell. How long do you guys think you were gone? I looked at Val. She looked like she was going to faint. "I don't know, maybe 10 minutes at the longest," I said. Corporal D looked at Val. "You need to sit down?" he asked. "You look like you're gonna pass out." Val shook her head. "No, I'm fine. Just a little shocked." "Understandable," he said. "I don't know why, but time is acting weird out there." "You mind if I take Will with me on this next check?" I asked. Val shot me a look that I'm sure she wished would kill me. "I don't care," Corporal D said, "as long as there's 2 of you going." "Thank you, sir," I said. "I'll let him know." Corporal D turned and walked away. "Sounds good, be safe." Once he was gone, I looked at Val. "Sorry, I know you wanted to be the one to ask. I panicked after the whole time issue. There's an unspoken rule at my facility. If you or your partner want to switch tasks or posts with another officer, the officer that initiated the request is the one who asks. So for me to ask on Val's behalf, especially as a rookie, could be taken as disrespect. I wasn't trying to disrespect you." "It's fine, Jay," she said softly. "I know you didn't mean anything by it." Val punched me on the shoulder. "Besides, I already called him before I walked back here." She smirked at me and walked towards intake. "Be careful out there," she said, looking over her shoulder as she walked away. Just then, Will walked up to me. "You ready?" "Yeah, let's go," I said. I notified Control, then Will and I walked outside. "What time you got?" I asked. Will pulled out his phone. I looked at him with wide eyes. "We aren't allowed to have our personal cell phones on us while on duty." D approved it, he said. I wouldn't snitch on Will for something so minor compared to what we were dealing with outside. "You know I wouldn't say anything. Now I can't slip you shit for it," I said. "I got 2,250, he said. I watched as he turned the stopwatch feature on. "Does your watch have a stopwatch?" "Yeah, I got 2,250 as well," I said. I turned on my stopwatch. "You ready?" "Ready as I'll ever be," he said. I checked the battery of the flashlight. "All right, battery says it's got about 3.5 hours. Will nodded and we started walking. As we rounded the first corner, Will stopped. "Hey, shine the light over there." He was pointing to the right at the tree line. I did, but didn't see anything. "What's up?" I asked. "Thought I heard something," he said. "Maybe I'm just paranoid." "Maybe," I said. "Keep it up and I'll have to throw you in with the rest of the crazies." I gave him a nudge on his shoulder. "Let's keep going." "Ha ha ha, very funny, Jay," he said sarcastically. "Just keep an ear out." We walked for another 20 feet before I saw something lying on the road up ahead. "What is that?" I asked. Once we got within 10 feet of it, we both froze. No, there's no way," Will whispered. "Ryan." I grabbed Will by the back of his vest when I saw he was beginning to run towards the figure laying in the road. "Will, stop," I said firmly. "We don't know it's actually him." "Fuck," he screamed. Will was breathing heavily and I could see he was tearing up. Just then the figure started to move. "What the fuck, man?" Will said. We began to inch closer and I could see the figure better. There was no mistaking the uniform hanging off the sunken frame of the body lying there. "Call it in," I said. Will reached for his radio, but as he was putting it to his face, the figure spoke. "Help me, please." As the last word left his mouth, I heard Will drop his radio. "Will." When it reached its arm up in a plea, I saw the nameplate on the torn-up vest it wore. It read Ryan P. There was no mistaking it now, this was Ryan. "Fucking how?" I whispered. Will picked up his radio and called it in. We both ran towards Ryan. He was in bad shape. His hair was long and had chunks missing. His face was swollen. He had deep cuts that were infected and oozed a viscous white and green liquid all over his cheeks. Though his face was swollen, his eyes were sunken in. He was missing teeth, and what teeth he did have were black and jagged. He looked extremely malnourished. The skin on his arms was sunken and revealing more bone than muscle. If it wasn't for the jumpsuit he wore, his pants would be falling off. I've seen pictures of him from before he went missing. The Ryan that Will knew was well built. He had neatly cut hair, he styled a high and tight haircut and was clean-shaven. The figure in front of Will and I was not the Ryan everyone knew. Corporal D arrived a couple minutes later and upon seeing Ryan's condition, promptly vomited into a bush. "Holy shit, is that—" Will cut him off. "It's fucking Ryan, get a fucking medic now," he shouted. Corporal D hurriedly pulled his phone out, almost dropping it, and made a call. I couldn't hear what he was saying, partly because I was paying more attention to Will and Ryan, but it didn't sound like he was on the phone with 911. "Will, what's going on? I don't think D is getting EMS. Sounds like he's talking to someone about Ryan," I whispered. This seemed to draw Will's attention away from Ryan. "I don't know." He was looking at Corporal D and knowing Will was studying his body language. "You see that, right?" he asked. I looked at Corporal D and watched him for a minute. He was pacing back and forth with his phone held up to his ear. "Seems normal to me," I said. Then I saw what Will was talking about. Every few steps he would peer over at us, but rather than showing concern, it looked more like he was suspiciously monitoring us. "What the fuck is he doing?" "Not sure, but something isn't sitting right," Will said before turning his attention back towards Ryan. After about 10 minutes, an ambulance and a fire engine arrived and rushed Ryan onto a gurney. They hooked him up to an EKG machine as well as an oxygen mask. I was standing with Will next to the gurney when we heard Ryan speak. "I'll be okay," he said through labored breaths. Come see me in the hospital." Corporal D handed his phone to the paramedic on the other side of the gurney from us. He put it to his ear, and after a moment I saw his eyes widen before looking at Corporal D. "Bring him to," Ryan said, shakily lifting his hand to point at me. Just then, the paramedics pushed Will and I back before they strapped Ryan down to the gurney with soft restraints, the ones that attached to the rails. Ryan looked at us. I could see the surprise and fear in his eyes. "What are you doing?" Will asked in surprise. Corporal D looked at me and I could see the worried look on his face. "Who was that on the phone?" I yelled. He walked up to me and said, "Jay, not now." As Ryan was loaded up into the ambulance, Will tried to get in, but Corporal D wouldn't let him. After the doors closed, I could see one of the paramedics loading up a syringe. The lights and sirens kicked on and the ambulance left. A couple of the firefighters were picking up some equipment off the ground while they were getting back into the engine. I haven't seen them use a sedative like that for a while, I heard one say to the other as they walked back to the rig. The three of us watched as the fire engine drove off. After the lights disappeared in the distance, I heard footsteps coming from the forest behind us. "You hear that?" I asked. We all turned around and I shined the flashlight towards the trees. "I didn't. What did you hear?" asked Corporal D. "Footsteps," I replied. Will growled. Will and I looked at each other. "Outer fence?" I asked. "Outer fence," Will said. "Let's go," said Corporal D. We started walking, and immediately after stepping off of the perimeter road and onto the grass, silence. I could see Will's mouth moving, but I couldn't hear anything. I motioned to my ear and shook my head to signal to them that I couldn't hear anything. Corporal D motioned us to keep moving. As we walked closer to the trailhead, I could see the reflection of the fence about 20 feet in front of us. After about 30 seconds of walking, I noticed the reflection never got any closer. Then my ears popped. "Ow, that fucking hurt," I said. I stopped walking. Will stopped shortly after. "Fuck, that stings." Almost immediately after Will, Corporal D stopped. "Shit," he yelled. We all looked at each other. "Where's the fence?" Will asked. I turned the flashlight back to where we were walking to. I swear the reflection from the fence was just there. Even with the flashlight, I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me. "That's new," Will said. After panning the flashlight around, I saw a glint up ahead. "There it is, let's go," I said. We started walking again. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Will turn around. "You hear that?" he asked. I handed the flashlight to Corporal D and turned around, walking backwards with Will. He already had pulled his flashlight and pointed the light straight ahead. Sounded like ceremonial drumming. "I don't hear anything." I squinted my eyes to try and see where Will was looking, but his light barely pierced through the void-like darkness in front of us enough to see maybe 10 feet in front of us. You okay, Will? I asked. Yeah, I'm fine, Will huffed. We turned around and continued walking. So you gonna tell us what that phone call was about? Corporal D dropped his head. I can't. Will stepped in front of Corporal D and stopped. His face was getting red. Bullshit, he yelled. What's with all the fucking secrecy, D? I'm already in deep shit for letting EMS show up for... Corporal D cut himself short. His eyes widened and his face showed that he let something slip. What the fuck do you mean first? I yelled. Corporal D turned towards me. Ever since I started, it feels like I need a top secret security clearance to know anything. Hell, I know even Will is keeping shit from me. I didn't even know about Ryan until today. Corporal D shot Will a surprised look. You told him about Ryan? Will looked like he was filled with boiling rage. Through clenched teeth, he growled, with this perimeter check bullshit tonight, he deserved to know. Corporal D sighed. Last time I checked, that's not your job to decide. So you were just going to send him on a suicide mission? Will asked. I could see Will balling his hands into fists. The look in his eyes showed he was ready for a fight. When I looked back at Corporal D, he looked dejected. Corporal, what the fuck are you hiding from us? From me? I asked. Why am I not allowed to know anything about what's been happening here? Corporal D broke. Tears flooded his eyes and he dropped to his knees. He set the flashlight on the ground and rubbed his eyes. I can't take this shit anymore, he wailed. Jay, it's not what I wanted to do. I knew what Will was going to tell you the second I saw him pull you to the side. Will unclenched his fists and rubbed the bridge of his nose. D, what the fuck is going on? I knelt down and picked up the flashlight. We received a message last night, Corporal D said, pulling his phone from his pocket. He opened up the media player and pressed play. When the recording started, a female voice could be heard whispering, "It will return." It was clear, by the cadence the voice spoke with, the voice was saying each word separately and not as one sentence. The voice grew louder, "It will return." A male voice could be heard joining the other voice. They spoke louder, "It will return." Speaking at a normal speaking level, the male voice continued alone, "It will return." It kept repeating the same thing as the female voice spoke, "Jay will die." Both voices grew louder, "Jay will die." The male voice still chanting, "It will return." As the two voices chanted their respective phrases, a familiar voice spoke, "Rule number 5, Will. I'm not taking you down with me." All three voices stopped. There was silence for a minute. Will and I looked at Corporal D, who held a finger up, signaling, "Hold on, there's more." Then a distorted voice in the recording broke the silence. "Rule number 5. The same voice came through again, this time more distorted than the last. "Rule num 5. Again it repeated, but this time the voice was so distorted all we heard was 5. The voice had lost all familiarity by this point and sounded demonic. After another long pause, a chorus of voices came through, too many to attempt to count. "It will return." Just like with the first voice, each word was emphasized as being on its own, not a part of a sentence. Immediately after, they repeated, "It will return." This time it sounded like the words were being screamed. The chanting continued, but again the voices grew more distorted. "Will return." Again they screamed, "Will return." Now followed by, "Jay will die." I looked at Will. He was frozen in place. His face had lost all the rage it previously held and was replaced by fear and confusion. The voices continued to scream, "Will return." This time it was clear. They were telling Will to return. The screaming coming from Corporal D's phone abruptly stopped. The familiar voice spoke again, "Jay will D." It sounded like they were crying. It was cut off and replaced by the sounds of someone taking a beating. We listened in silence to the sounds of someone getting the shit beat out of them. The recording ended with the sound of ceremonial drumming. I could barely make out the sounds of chanting over the drumming, but could not understand what they said. Corporal D put his phone back into his pocket. "How did you get that?" I asked. Corporal D looked up at me and said, "I honestly don't know. I was looking through old pictures on my phone when I got home yesterday and saw it in the recent files folder when I opened up the gallery. I thought it was some sick joke when I first saw the title. Ryan was the warning." "Warning for what?" Will asked. "No clue," Corporal D replied. I knew there were no follow-up questions either of us wanted to ask, not right then at least. "Who was on the phone, D?" Will asked. I played the recording for the admins this morning, explained Corporal D. They told me to call them if anything happened tonight. Corporal D stood up. I was ordered specifically to not call for EMS if anyone got hurt outside. He clasped his hands behind his head. Or if anyone was found alive. I could tell by his face that something clicked. Those motherfuckers knew what was going to fucking happen. They fucking knew we'd find Ryan. Fucking hell, I sighed. I looked over at Will, the rage filling his face again. I expected him to yell, but he didn't say anything. After a brief silence, Will finally spoke. That was Ryan's voice. We all looked at each other, then at the ground. We stood there in silence for what seemed like an eternity, digesting what we had just heard. I broke the silence. How long does it feel like it's been since we started the check? I'm meaning before we found Ryan too. Dunno, maybe 45 minutes, Will said. Feels like we've walked at least a mile too. My guess would be maybe 2 miles minimum, Corporal D said. I looked down at my watch. According to my stopwatch, it's been... Jay, Will. Die had echoed from all around us. It was the same voices from the recording. I could hear the sounds of footsteps in every direction. I panned the flashlight in a circle. What the fuck? From what I could see, we were in a clearing. Tall pine and Douglas fir trees formed what looked like the start of a ring around the grass. Off to the left of us, I saw something coming out of the ground. What's that? We walked over to what was clearly a sapling. Looks like a yew sapling, Will said. The footsteps grew louder around us. The voices returned. Jay. Will. Die. The sound was deafening. I could feel the ground shake as the drumming started. A female voice whispered, "It has returned." This time I didn't hear the voice. The voice was in my head. "He returned," it said. The message was in his blood. Then there was silence again. No footsteps or chanting or drumming. "What does she mean?" I asked. "You heard it too, huh?" Will asked. "Same here," Corporal D said. "There's something else I'm not supposed to tell you." "More secrets?" I asked. "Shocker," Will said sarcastically. "What is it this time?" "You remember that sample I took of the writing on the window?" asked Corporal D. "It came back positive for blood." "I kind of figured that one," I said. "Well, the DNA test came back too," Corporal D said. "It was Ryan's blood." We all looked at the tree in front of us. "What kind of sick fucking game is this?" Will asked. "Who pissed off the land spirits?" "I have no clue," Corporal D answered. "What are land spirits?" I asked. "An old native folklore," Will said. "They are child-sized creatures that look like humans. Only difference being, if you're unlucky enough to see one, the longer you look at them, they start to not look human." Just as Will finished talking, the flashlight died. "Fuck," I said. I tried to turn it back on, but it was no use. "Flashlight is dead." "How long until sunrise, Jay?" asked Corporal D. I looked at my watch and saw it was 2 in the morning. 7 hours, I think. It's 2 right now. Luckily, the trees don't block the moonlight in this clearing. "Maybe we should start to head back," said Will. "There's not much light, but it's better than not." The footsteps started again. This time they sounded like they were right on top of us. I felt a sharp pain in my head before everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying next to Will and the sun was up. I sat up to see blood covering us both. "What the fuck?" Will sat up and looked around. "Where's D?" he asked. I stood up and rubbed my eyes. All I could see was Will, the sapling, and blood everywhere. "Corporal D," I yelled. "Jay, he's gone," Will said. With the sun out, I could see the entirety of the clearing. It was a perfect circle. The tall pine and Douglas fir trees I saw at night lined the grass, creating a perimeter. "Whoa," I said. Will and I turned and looked at the sapling. Jay, Will, was carved into the trunk. "It's missing a word," I said. Will looked at me. "Die." Will looked back at the tree and studied it. After a couple seconds, he turned around and looked at the blood on the grass. Holy fuck. When I turned around to look at what he saw, I felt a shiver run up my spine. The blood next to where we woke up formed the letter D. I looked all around, searching for more letters, but saw none. "What does this mean?" I asked. Will was staring back at the markings on the sapling. "Jay?" "Will. Die." I heard him whisper. He mumbled something to himself and then looked at me with horror and excitement filling his eyes. "Jay, I figured it out." "Figured what out?" I asked. "Ugh," Will groaned while grabbing the sides of his head. How the fuck did I not see that sooner? He yelled. What? I asked. Will, what the fuck is it? D, he said. Okay, I said. Will looked at me frustrated. Use your fucking head, Jay. I'm trying here, Will, but I don't see it. I said. Die, Will said. Fucking hell, man, that's a little harsh, don't you think? I asked, laughing nervously. I was starting to think Will had finally lost it. For the love of, Will said, Jay, spell die. D-I-E, I said, I don't get. Then it hit me. Corporal D, when they said Jay will die, they weren't sending me a threat. Exactly, Will shouted. They were saying D is going to die. It wasn't a message, it was a list. That's why it's missing from the tree, I said. You and me are still here, that means, I said. Will and I both hung our heads. Will knelt down and picked something off of the ground. They lead us here, he said before handing me a piece of metal. It was a fence pole cap with a strip of reflective tape on the top of it. This must be the glint I saw last night. I'm sorry, D, Will said while staring at the sky. I hope it was painless. I thought back to last night, right before everything went black. I felt the back and sides of my head. That's strange, I said. Will, check your head. Will felt his head. Huh. For something or someone to have knocked us out, wouldn't there be a lump or at least a painful spot, I asked. Yeah, Will said, I feel nothing. Me either, I said. Looking back, the pain I felt right before going black felt more like a sharp headache. Like pain in my head instead of on my head. Same here, Will said. Let's get the fuck out of here before it happens again. I looked at my watch. According to the stopwatch, it says we've been gone 12 hours. Will pulled out his phone. Mine says 4 hours. His face went pale. Jay, what time do you have? My phone says it's 4 in the morning. I looked back down at my watch. Mine says the same. I looked back at Will. How is the sun out then? I asked. We need to go. We can talk about it later, Will said. I saw Will's eyes following something behind me. Yeah, let's go. I didn't care to see what was coming. We both started running. I hope this is the way we came in, he said. We reached the tree line and had to slow down to avoid tripping on the roots. I could hear a blood-curdling scream coming from the clearing behind me. Neither of us turned around to look. We just kept running. After a few minutes of running, we were out of the forest and back to the perimeter road. That should not have been that quick, I said, while hunched over trying to catch my breath. No, it should not have been, Will said between breaths. I put my hands behind my head and looked up at the sky. When I opened my eyes, I expected to see blinding sunlight, but it was dark. Either I'm blind or it's still night. You're not blind. Will was looking around. We are right back where we found Ryan. Guess we picked the right direction? I laughed. I looked towards where the emergency vehicles parked earlier. Something feels off. Yeah, I feel it too, Will said. Out of instinct, I radioed to control that we had completed our check and were heading back in. Will pulled out his phone to turn it off. Huh. He chuckled. Do I even want to know? I asked. I looked at Will as Control's response came through my radio. Control copy. Perimeter check complete, 2320. As we walked back to the officer entrance, we were stopped by a black SUV. The driver window rolled down and I could see a man in a suit look at me and Will. Get in. We heard the click of the doors unlocking. Who are you supposed to be? Will asked. The man pulled out his wallet and flashed us his ID and badge. DHS, Supernatural Investigations, Agent Hill, he said. Will and I looked at each other. Let's not keep him waiting, Will whispered to me. We already have a fuck-ton of questions to answer. Don't feel like getting thrown in cuffs while they ask. Will opened the door and we got inside. The driver rolled his window back up and locked the doors before driving off. We've got a long drive and you guys have been through it tonight. Get some sleep. I felt like I was having a panic attack. When I looked at Will, he seemed calm. You been through this before? I asked. Once, he said before settling in and laying his head back on the headrest. Get some sleep, it'll be okay. I looked out the window and looked at the night sky. After a while, I fell asleep. The house was a steal. That should have been the first red flag. A spacious Victorian with wraparound porches and enough charm to look like it came from a postcard, but the price was less than a studio apartment in the city. I signed the papers without a second thought. The garden was a surprise. I noticed it the day I moved in, tucked behind a crumbling picket fence in the backyard. Rows of vibrant flowers stretched out like soldiers on parade, colors so bright they looked painted. Deep crimson roses, sun-yellow marigolds, and violet irises that glowed like embers in the twilight. A narrow path lined with stones wound through it. "It's beautiful," my new neighbor Mrs. Harper said when she peeked over the fence. "Though I'd keep an eye on it if I were you." "What do you mean?" She hesitated, glancing at the flowers as if they could hear her. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The last owner, well, she always said the garden didn't like being neglected." She laughed, but it was strained, like she didn't quite believe her own joke. "You know how old women get." I regret not asking more questions, but I was tired and I had a lot of work to do. I spent the first week settling in. The garden required no attention. It thrived on its own, even in the blazing heat. Every morning I'd wake up to find new blooms, some I'd never seen before. Flowers with petals like velvet, others with strange waxy textures that shimmered in the sun. It was mesmerizing, but something about it felt wrong. It was hard to put my finger on the heart of the issue. Or, fuck, I shouldn't lie. I was stupid, wrote my unease off as allergies and otherwise ignored it. One night, near the end of my first week living in the new house, while I was unpacking in the living room, I heard a strange sound. A faint rustling, like fabric brushing against the floor. I froze, listening. It came again, louder this time and closer. I glanced out the window at the backyard. The flowers were moving, not swaying in the wind. There was no wind. They rippled, row by row, like a wave. My stomach dropped. I slammed the curtains shut and turned on every light in the house. Then I blared my favorite podcast so I didn't have to listen. Like I said, stupid. The next day I decided to cut the garden back. I told myself it was just overgrown, that the movement had been my imagination. Armed with gloves and pruning shears, I stepped onto the path. The air smelled sweet, almost sickeningly so. As I snipped the first vine, I heard it. A faint whisper, so quiet I thought it was my own breath. Then the vine curled. I jumped back, dropping the shears. The vine coiled around itself, pulling away from my reach like a wounded animal. The whispering grew louder. My hands shook as I stumbled out of the garden, slamming the gate shut behind me. Was the sun brighter than it had been? The white walls of my house seemed to glow, and there were dark after impressions left in my vision. I called Mrs. Harper, demanding, "What do you know about the garden?" "Who is this?" "You know who this is. What do you know about the garden?" Silence answered me. I could hear the flofers moving in waves again. "Tell me, damn it, what's wrong with the flowers?" My voice cracked, my skin itched, and my eyes watered. Allergies. It was just allergies. "I'm sorry," Mrs. Harper said. "I told you they didn't like to be ignored. I have to go. Don't you dare hang up on me." Click. The line went dead. My eyes itched so much it burned. That night I dreamed of roots crawling under my skin. After that, the whispers became a nightly occurrence. Sometimes they sounded like words I couldn't quite make out. Other times they were low, guttural, like growls. When I woke, there was a layer of near-neon yellow pollen on all of the windows. I stopped sleeping, started keeping my bedroom door locked. I know you're asking, why didn't you leave? I just bought a house. Steal or not, I'm broke. So I stayed, and eventually the vines came inside. It was subtle at first. A sprig of ivy on the windowsill, a thorn stem poking out of the floorboards. I yanked them out only for more to appear before the day's end. They spread faster than I could fight them, bringing along that thick, almost coarse pollen. By the third night, they were everywhere, wrapping around furniture, snaking up the walls. I couldn't do anything about it, and the flowers started blooming inside. They weren't beautiful anymore. Their colors were unnatural, too vivid, and their petals oozed a thick, dark sap that smelled like rot. It was worst at night. Something about the starlight seemed to make them more active. I tried to leave, thinking if nothing else I could find a women's shelter to spend the night in, but the front door wouldn't budge. The vines had grown through the cracks, binding it shut. The windows were covered with thick stripes of pollen-coated green. While I raced from window to window, muttering, "Shit, fuck, God fucking damn it," under my breath, between body-shaking sneezes, I realized the garden wasn't just alive. Wasn't just lonely either, it was hungry. I realized that when I saw the first flower open in front of me, its petals unfurled with a wet pop, revealing something sharp and glistening inside. Teeth. It lurched forward. Shrieking, I threw myself back, arms thrown up in front of my face. Other flowers began to unfurl, their petals so fuchsia bright that it made my head throb. The pollen clung to my skin in a thick, itchy film. Once delicate daffodils now bared their fangs at me. The roses had more to bite with than just their thorns. Pure fear fueling me, I ran, barricading myself in the attic. What else could I do? If there were other outcomes, I wasn't finding them. Now I'm trapped. The whispers are louder, the walls groaning under the weight of the vines. They're closing in, wrapping tighter around the house. I can hear the vines slithering around on the floor beneath me. All I smell is a scent so sweet it's turned to rot. This morning I found a rose blooming on my wrist. Its thorny stem burrowed under my skin like it belonged there. The petals are such a vibrant shade of magenta. It almost burns to look at. I don't think I'll make it out. If you find this, burn the garden, burn the house, don't let it grow anymore. I boarded my flight, walked to the very back of the plane, and kindly told the passengers sitting in my aisle that my seat was 32E. After standing up to allow me to pass through, I took my seat, set down my bag between my legs, and put my headphones over my ears. The flight attendant made an announcement that we would be taking off soon and everyone needed to switch their devices to airplane mode. Before I made the switch, I sent a text to my boyfriend and family letting them know that I was about to take off, and that I couldn't wait to see them at the hotel. I turned on my new Spotify playlist I made the night before, leaned back, and reminisced about all of the fun memories I have made at this little quaint hotel on the coast of Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. For years now, my family has taken an annual December trip there to enjoy a few days in the sunshine, before we all go back to snowy upstate New York. This year is particularly exciting because it is the first time my boyfriend will be joining us. He travels a lot for work, so since he was already in California leading up to the trip, he decided to meet me in Cabo instead of flying back to Chicago to travel with me. The red seatbelt light flashed above my seat and the flight attendant told us to prepare for takeoff. Shit, I forgot to turn my phone on airplane mode. I opened my phone and quickly parsed through the emoji-littered texts from my family wishing me safe travels, before I saw a text from a random number. I opened it and it was a picture of me in the airport sitting down at the gate with a Starbucks in hand. The text said, "See you soon." What the fuck? My heart started racing and my iPhone case became damp from the sweat dripping down my fingers. I Googled the number to see who this might be, and all of a sudden I hear, "Ma'am, we are taking off right now. I see you texting. Please turn your phone to airplane mode now." I jumped up and profusely apologized. I reluctantly turned my phone to airplane mode and went back to the text conversation with the unknown number. I couldn't stop staring at the photo of me. Who could this possibly be? It must be someone on this flight, but I didn't recognize anyone when I walked to my seat. Granted, I wasn't paying much attention to the people around me. Maybe it's a friend of mine who is surprising me, but why would I not have their number saved? My mind started racing with possibilities. Any plans I had of enjoying a relaxing flight flew out the window. I couldn't just listen to Taylor Swift and play crosswords on my phone anymore. I could hardly sit still in my seat. I needed to get to the bottom of this ASAP, but first I needed Wi-Fi. As soon as we were up in the air, I checked for Wi-Fi. Right below the airline's Wi-Fi, I saw a private network called Your Worst Nightmare EMG. I covered my mouth and audibly gasped. EMG? Those are my initials. This can't be a coincidence, right? If this isn't a subtle message towards me, why else would someone name their Wi-Fi network that? I couldn't come up with a logical reason. I tried not to let my uncontrollable thoughts take over and focused on the task at hand. I logged into the airline's Wi-Fi, paid the $20 per hour, and all of a sudden I received 2 more messages from the unknown number. The first message is another picture of me, but this time I am sitting in my seat on the plane. The text says, "Have a safe flight. Can't wait to spend more time with you." What the fuck? More time with me? What does that mean? Have I met this person before? I couldn't tell how far away the photo was taken since it was intentionally zoomed in on my face. I barely lifted myself out of my seat and scanned the rest of the plane. It was hard to see any faces, and I couldn't pinpoint anyone that I even remotely recognized. I sat back down and started shaking in my seat. I needed to somehow calm down, or else I was going to have a panic attack. I waved the flight attendant down and requested a double gin and tonic. I was going to need it before I even looked at the next text I received. The flight attendant brought over the drink with a smile and asked if I needed anything else. I shook my head, no, and started drinking as fast as I could. I bet the people sitting next to me thought I was having some type of mental breakdown. They wouldn't be wrong, I was having a mental breakdown. I finished the drink before the flight attendant even fully walked away and stared down at my phone. Before I hit the messages app, another text from that number popped up. I swiped down to read it and it said, "Gin and tonic, great choice. Don't drink too much, we have a long day ahead." I almost fainted. Someone is clearly watching me on this plane. Who could it possibly be? And long day ahead? What do they mean by that? I am scheduled to arrive at 6 p.m. and am supposed to have dinner with my family at 8 p.m. I'm debating whether I should respond to this person or not. That's when I realized I haven't even opened up the other text I received earlier. I go back to our conversation and see another picture. The picture is fairly grainy. I zoom in and noticed it's a pool with 2 kids swimming. Wait a second, that's not just 2 kids, that's me and my brother. At the Cabo Hotel pool. This must have been from years ago. How could someone possibly get this photo? Unless they took it? Who is this person? I then read the text underneath the photo and chills went down my spine. "You were always so cute as a child, looking forward to our time together now that you are an adult." When I was 12 years old, I had a friend whose fascination with the devil became a consuming obsession. She frequently claimed she had sold her soul to him, and while her declarations unsettled me, they also intrigued me. It felt like she wielded a power over her own narrative, akin to a character from a story I had yet to fully decipher. One day, she brought an Ouija board to school, convinced that it would be our gateway to the supernatural realm. Her excitement was infectious, and I found myself swept up in the idea of connecting with something beyond our ordinary lives. We decided to sneak into a dimly lit bathroom during lunch, our hearts racing with the thrill of secrecy. The peeling paint on the walls and flickering overhead lights created an atmosphere ripe for a supernatural encounter. Once inside, we turned off all the lights, enveloping ourselves in a thick blanket of darkness. Armed with only the faintest glow from the stray light peeking through the cracks, we placed our fingers lightly on the planchette, its wood cold beneath our touch. At first, as we attempted to summon spirits, nothing significant happened. My skepticism began to rise. I couldn't shake the feeling that my friend was somehow manipulating the planchette, moving it ever so slightly under the guise of a spirit's influence. However, the air around us felt charged, electric with anticipation, like static before a storm. As we continued, I stole a glance into the shadows, and my heart almost stopped. There, amidst the thick veil of darkness, I saw a pair of piercing green eyes. They glowed with an unsettling luminescence unlike anything I had encountered before. They seemed to absorb the surrounding light and radiate an almost eerie allure. Fear gripped my chest as I realized we had, perhaps unknowingly, crossed a threshold into something far darker than our innocent game had intended. These eyes weren't the fiery red of demons from horror stories. Instead, they emanated a chilling, otherworldly presence, sending shivers down my spine. Instinctively, I knew we needed to escape the bathroom. As I emerged from the suffocating darkness, I reached out and grasped her hand, feeling the cool tile beneath our feet contrasting sharply with the warmth of our intertwined fingers. However, as we rounded the corner, she suddenly paused, her brow furrowing and a look of bewilderment crossing her face. "Why are we in such a hurry?" she asked, confusion clouding her features. Time seemed to stretch in that moment, my heart hammering in my chest as I hesitated, grappling with what I had just witnessed. "What about the eyes? Did you see them?" I blurted out in desperation. Her reaction was surprising. She stared at me as though I had lost my grip on reality. "What eyes?" she replied, shaking her head with incredulity. She didn't see anything amiss. To her it appeared I was simply anxious. I felt a wave of disorientation wash over me. It was as though I had conjured a hallucination while she remained blissfully ignorant of the truth lurking in the darkness. After that disconcerting encounter, it felt as if she had vanished from existence altogether. There were no traces of her at school, no fleeting glimpses in the hallway or murmurs of her name. My mind raced with unanswered questions and a growing sense of urgency as I inquired with teachers and classmates, seeking even a hint, a glimmer of recognition. Their responses, however, were the same: blank stares and laughter, dismissive incredulity. "I don't know who you're talking about," they would say. leaving me feeling increasingly isolated and bewildered. In the following nights, a gnawing sense of unease enveloped me like a heavy cloak. It felt as if reality itself had subtly shifted, leaving me trapped in a world that grew increasingly distorted with each passing day. Small anomalies became my constant companions. The paint on my bedroom walls seemed to shift hues mysteriously. A beloved book would inexplicably vanish from my shelf, or I would catch a fleeting reflection in the mirror that didn't quite align with my own features. The most jarring experience, though, was the disorientation that came with time. Days blended together, feeling strangely out of order, and I would sometimes awaken with the unsettling certainty that years had slipped by while the calendar insistently declared otherwise. With each new day, an undercurrent of dread coiled tightly around my chest, whispering that something profoundly wrong lay beneath the surface of my life, a sinister reality unraveling around me, and I was the only one aware of this disruption in the fabric of existence. Weeks later, I received a notification from an unfamiliar user on social media. The name sparked faint recognition, and as we began chatting, a chilling truth emerged. She had tricked me. The friend I once knew was not who she seemed. She was a demon. By touching the Ouija board that day, I had unwittingly cursed myself, sealing my fate. She explained that each night my essence would drift through shifting realities, each one leading me closer to the grotesque realm of hell. Overwhelmed by the sheer weight of this revelation, I withdrew from the world. I barricaded myself in my room for a week, emerging only for food or to use the bathroom, too terrified to engage anyone. The faces around me, my family, my friends, seemed like hollow shells, mere puppets created by some malignant force intent on driving me mad. I had not lost my sanity, rather I had come to accept the crushing reality of my existence. It dawned on me that one day I would inevitably descend into hell, and there was nothing I could do to avert that terrifying fate. When I was 8 years old, I heard a tapping at my window. Now I was never a scared child. My dad was a self-proclaimed weirdo who had, maybe unwisely, shown me all of the slasher classics before my 6th birthday. This all led to the type of kid who'd watch us Stand By Me and be inspired to go look for a body himself. So when I heard that tapping at my bedroom window, I swung myself out of bed. I was determined to investigate its source. The fact that it just turned midnight and I was awake later than I usually ever am only added to the mystique. I slid my dinosaur-shaped slippers on, crept over the scattered piles of Lego to the other side of my room. Just before I peeled back the curtains, the tapping stopped. This brought my curiosity to a fever pitch and I yanked the curtains open. The first thing I noticed was that the window was wide open, stretching the hinges as far as they could go. I was hit with a whoosh of cold air and tightened my bathrobe in response. The second thing I noticed was the long yellow school bus in the middle of my street, parked silently at the end of my driveway. What compelled me next was more than childlike wonder and a keen sense of adventure. I almost felt like I was being dragged by my ear as I climbed onto the windowsill and fell out of my room into the night. I was soaked by the dew-covered grass of the front lawn. It was early July and the sprinklers were on full blast, but I didn't care all that much. I got to my feet, brushing the dirt and dandelions off myself, and made my way over to the bus. There was no hum, no rattle of the exhaust. The bus was completely silent. I stood in front of the doors and tried to peer through the glass panels. They were so thick with grit and grime that I couldn't see anything. While I had my face cupped to them, the doors swung open. I jumped back, startled. I collected myself and finally saw the interior. Inside, it was barely lit enough to see. A single electric bulb dangled in the center of the aisle. I stepped onto the bus to get a better look. The seats were a maroon leather and battered within an inch of their life. The metal floor was covered in rust and black grease. As far as I could make out, there were 6 other children. All of them were my age, all dressed in pajamas and shivering. None of them spoke when they noticed me. I was about to get off when a voice made me jump out of my skin. I thought the driver's booth was empty, but now I could make out the figure of someone sitting at the wheel, shrouded in shadow. "Are you staying on?" the person said in a gruff, genderless voice. The same feeling that had compelled me to climb out of my bedroom window and onto the bus likewise compelled me to reply, "Yes." The mechanical whirring of the bus doors closing snapped me back to reality. I suddenly realized my mistake. I rushed to the booth's window and pleaded with the driver. Wait, I've made a mistake. It's past my bedtime. Please, sir, let me off, I argued. The driver sniffed and said, Can't, you've already paid your fare. Go take a seat with the others. I stumbled back as the bus roared silently into motion. I ran between the seats, watching my house slowly fade into the distance. I climbed onto the back seat and saw it disappear around a corner. I realized that at the back of the bus there were 2 other doors. My plans of escape were smothered when I saw the red emergency handle. It was bound in chains. I turned to run back to the driver when I saw someone I recognized. I walked over to her seat and sat next to her. She turned to look at me, and my suspicions were confirmed. It was Marcy. She'd been in my class up until the beginning of this year when her parents pulled out to homeschool her. Marcy? I said softly. Marcy seemed perfectly calm. She was wearing pink pajamas decorated with a cartoon character I didn't recognize. She'd been humming to herself and swinging her legs back and forth. One of her unicorn slippers had fallen off, but she didn't seem to care. Oh, hiya, Jake, she said, as if we'd just bumped into each other at a playground. What's going on? I asked. Well, Mom and Dad told me that I had to go on this trip. They said something about a surprise party, but I don't know whose birthday it is. Your parents know about this? I pressed her for more information. Of course they do. They stayed up with me all night and brought me out to the bus when it came. Mom talked a lot with the driver. He seems nice. I think they're old friends or something. I was oddly calmed by her explanation. If her parents knew, then maybe mine did. I sank into my chair as I began to accept what was going on. But there was one more question I needed to ask her. Marcy? Yes? Do you feel sleepy at all? Marcy scrunched up her face in thought, then looked at me and replied, No. I felt the same. I was up later than I had ever been, yet I didn't feel tired at all. The opposite, actually. I felt full of energy. Marcy started talking about something while she stroked her long red hair, but I wasn't listening. I sat up in my seat, looking around at the 5 other children on the bus. From what I could make out, their emotions ranged from apathy to quiet terror. The bus rattled on for another 20 minutes. I felt the same feeling in my stomach as I did before a spelling test at school. I looked past Marcy and out the window. All I saw were trees. I didn't even know if we were still driving on an actual road anymore. I and every other kid in the bus jumped when the driver flicked on the radio. It played classical music, heavily diluted with static. After a while, the driver mumbled to himself and switched it off. Before long, the bus came to a halt. Instinctively, we all made our way out of the seats and up the aisle towards the door in a line. We all saw the man waiting for us outside. The doors began to open, and in single file, we made our way out. As I exited the bus, I gave a cautious glance back. The driver's booth was very clearly empty. The man waiting for us was surprisingly well dressed. His pinstripe suit made me instantly think of him as a banker. He looked young, but he was balding. What blonde hair he had left was harshly slicked back against his scalp. I couldn't see his eyes past the circular red lenses of his glasses. "Come on, children," he said in a soft, calming voice. "You're all going to come with me now." With that, he began to lead us deeper into the forest. The other children fired one question after another at him: who he was and why we're here. Finally, it came my turn to tug at the hem of his jacket and ask him the first thing that came to mind. "Excuse me, where are we going?" I asked. He chuckled and ruffled my hair. "We're going to meet Oz," he dutifully replied. Before I got a chance to ask him who Oz was, the particularly overweight boy next to me asked him his name. The man told us all his name was Horace and that we should keep our questions to ourselves until we got to the party. I fell back a bit to walk next to Marcy. She still seemed as nonchalant about the whole thing as ever. "Hey, Marcy, do you know someone called Oz?" She thought long and hard and then told me that she didn't. We walked in silence for a while after that until suddenly she spoke again. "I know Horace, though," she said. I looked at her dumbfounded. "You know him?" I said, gesturing towards the man who was walking a few paces in front of us, now holding the hand of one of the other children. "Well, I don't know him," she said with a shrug. "But he turned up at my house a few weeks ago. I'm pretty sure that was him. He just had a coffee with my parents and left." She squinted her eyes thoughtfully and then said, "Yeah, it was definitely him. He had the same glasses on." After that, Marcy went back to picking petals from a flower she'd torn from the ground. I was trying to think of another question for her when suddenly the group came to a stop. Me and Marcy had been walking at the back and didn't notice when the kid at the front burst into tears. Horace crouched down next to him, putting an affirming hand on his shoulder. When the boy didn't immediately stop crying, Horace grew irate. It was clear that he didn't know how to handle children. "What is kid?" he snapped. "Huh? Miss your fucking parents? Is that it?" I'd gradually been desensitized to language like that at home, but the other kids around me, apart from Marcy, reacted like they'd been punched in the gut. Some physically recoiled. Horace stood up and continued, "Do you want candy? Will that shut you up? Here, I've got candy." With that, he stuffed his hand into his jacket pocket. After some rummaging, he pulled out a crumpled packet of apple-flavored chewing gum and, in a brittle attempt to buy his silence, forced it into the sobbing boy's palm. Amazingly, this didn't stop his wailing. Horace sighed intensely and turned to face the rest of us. "All right, everyone start moving," he said with a wave of his hand. One by one, we started to follow him deeper into the forest, now driven by fear more than anything else. The boy at the front, who Marcy informed me was called Peter, had finally stopped crying. Horace kept a close eye on him. Every so often, he'd announce that we were almost there. I still didn't know what "there" was supposed to be. But as we passed through the tree line into a bizarre clearing, I found out. The grass was scorched. Etched into the ground was a symbol I would later learn was called a heptagram. This 7-sided star must have been at least 50 feet in diameter, and was perfectly proportioned. 24 people in plain clothes were milling around the outskirts of the star, talking to each other or sipping from cans. They all stopped when they saw us emerging from the woods. Some clapped and cheered, all smiled. A man walked over to us, greeted Horace with a handshake, and kneeled to talk to us at eye level. "Hey kids," he said with a plastic grin, "my name is Capnian. Are you all excited for the big night?" When none of us replied, he stood up and said, "I'm sure you are." With that, he turned to Horace and whispered something to him. Horace laughed, and the pair began to walk off. Capnian turned back to us and said, "You all just wait patiently right there," before following Horace to a group of men and women. I was so focused on the scene in front of me that when Marcy spoke from just behind me, I almost had a heart attack. "That was my Sunday school teacher," she said, staring blankly ahead. "Who?" I inquired. "Capnian?" "Yes, and his name isn't Capnian," she told me. "It's Gary." The group of us 7 kids were waiting while the adults busied themselves, arranging small stones and sticks and lighting brass lanterns that dangled from every suitably sturdy tree branch. After some time, 7 of the adults came over to us. They each took us by the hands and led us away from each other. The woman who came to me looked old as far as I can remember. Her hair was a dark gray and tangled in unkempt dreadlocks. She wore a blue jacket over her floral summer dress and had more beads around her neck than I could count. Trying to put me at ease, she told me her name was Prasada. Even at the age I was then, I could tell she was lying, just like the rest of them. We came to a stop and I realized we were now standing on one point of the star. I looked around and saw that each point now bore a child. With that, the rest of the adults congregated in the center of the star. Prasada stood behind me, resting her hands on my shoulders. She began whispering her comfort like my mother would if I had skinned my knee. I felt calm in that moment, like nothing could harm me. Prasada stroked my hair and in a low voice said, There, Jake, don't worry, it will all be over soon." How did she know my name? Suddenly, my calm facade died. I realized what I was doing and where I was. I became a bundle of nerves and started crying. Prasada tried to rein me in, but I was beyond her reasoning. I wiggled violently from her hold as the chanting of the adults reached a deafening tumult. Steam began to rise from the ground. I didn't look back when I heard the other children scream briefly. I just kept running. Deep and deeper still, I ran into the forest. My slippers had been lost in panic, and my feet were a pincushion of pine needles. I could hear people chasing after me, barking obscenities I knew I could never repeat to my parents. Away from the light of the gathering, I was now running in pitch darkness. Every few seconds I'd be bathed in the torchlight of my pursuers, and I would be forced to set a new course. Finally, the darkness began to give way. I burst out of the tree line onto a road. Directly across from me was the neon embrace of a gas station. The automatic doors hid me inside, and I didn't stop running until I reached the counter. I was met with a very confused-looking woman. At 7, everyone looks like a giant. Thinking back on it, she must have only been in her late teens. I managed to articulate that I needed to call my parents. She took out her Nokia and asked me for the number. I panicked as I realized I didn't know it, but she calmed me down by telling me that we could just call 911. A single police car turned up 20 minutes later. It was a long night, only made longer by the policeman's poor attempt in trying to communicate with a child. Eventually, my parents arrived and showered me in warmth and kindness. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, in my own house, happily thinking that the night before was just a bad dream. That night was the first time I feared death. It was a feeling that, thankfully, I would feel again. Until now. At the tender age of 25, I have been diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, glioblastoma multiforme. Only a quarter of those diagnosed see the end of the year. My doctor informed me bluntly that my tumor had no possibility of being removed, and the best they could do was regular chemotherapy sessions, which would hopefully shrink it to a manageable size. At the behest of my already grieving parents, I took the offer. In this case, the treatment felt worse than the illness itself. It came with constant fatigue, mouth ulcers, the worst headaches of my life, and more. A few days ago, my hair began to fall out. I opted to cut the rest off. My nurse came to me with a shaver, and I joked that I'd like a number 2. We laughed as she wrapped a towel around me and began to cut away the remainder of my once thick head of hair. Before long, she remarked, "Quirky tattoo. Where'd you get it?" I told her that I didn't have any tattoos, and she joked that I must have been drinking a lot the night I got it. We laughed again, my sense of humor the one thing not affected by chemo, and she handed me a mirror. I held it out in front of me to admire her handiwork. Engraved into my scalp was an incomplete heptagram. One of its points was missing, leaving it in imperfect symmetry. From deep within me, I realized what it will take to fill it in. I had a dream. In that dream, I was in a box. It was made out of obsidian. I could see that because of a tiny light that shined through. That little circle let me know where I was. Otherwise, it was dark. I could only walk. And as I walked, I realized I was in a square. I don't know how much time there was. In dreams, I don't understand much. I don't know where I was. Nor should I even care. I didn't feel any fear. I should have felt fear. A door opened, and I walked through it. And now I was in complete darkness. I had clothes on, but I didn't have shoes. I could feel the cold surface. Still obsidian. I kept walking on land. I could see nothing. There were no sounds except my own breathing. I never talked. I kept walking. I could smell something metallic. I kept walking. And then a limb grabbed my left leg. I could feel the fingers press against my skin. As I tried to fling it away, I fell. And as I fell, 3 more hands grabbed each of my limbs and began to pull me apart. I could feel the pain. I could feel my skin stretch. Cuts emerged. Somehow my bones never left. I don't know why my bones never left, but the blood was seeping out. And then I could feel something try to drink my blood. I could feel something just slurp it up. I was getting terrified. My heart was beating. And finally I woke up. I looked around and saw I was in my own home. There was nothing much. Then the next day I went to sleep again. I went to bed around 11 p.m. I didn't pay much thought. I thought it was just a nightmare. As I went to sleep, I woke up in a wooden box, square. There was a glass ceiling above, and below there was a carpet. And in front of me, there was a woman at a desk. She was beautiful in a dress. I was sitting down on the carpet, and she asked me a question. "Do you want resin?" I said yes. She said okay. And she handed me a piece, then I woke up again. But I saw something on my left hand on my wrist. Somehow I had a cut that said resin. And then I went back to sleep. Next day after, I went back to sleep again. This time I was nervous. I was awake till 2 a.m. Finally, somehow I went to sleep. I didn't wanna. I was scared of what I would see. This day was a yellow box, color of a lemon. It was just painted so. I was in this box and the woman came back in. As she came back in, she came to my left wrist. She looked at my hand. Resin was still engraved in it, though throughout the day it had started to fade away. It was just a scratch. As she saw that, she held my hand, and she looked at me and smiled. I was terrified. "I have resin. Do you want it on you?" I said. "No," she asked. "Do you want it on me?" I said, "Why?" "Because it can be a deal. I have it on me right now, then you have it later." I said, "Sure." So she looked into her pocket and pulled out a piece. "I have it on me right now." And then she gave it to me. "You will have it forever." I said, "Okay." And then I woke up. I could swear I saw a shadow move away, and I looked at both my right and left wrist and I saw the word resin on it. I don't know what was happening. Next day I was just researching resin and it clicked. Rains. I don't know how to explain that. I just felt every single hair on my body stand. What am I into? What is happening? I stayed awake the whole night, and I stayed awake the whole day until finally I collapsed. I woke up, and this time I was in a red room. It was like the yellow room, but painted again. The red was a dark red. I looked in front, and the woman was already there. She walked towards me. "You learned, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, I do not want anything." And she said, "How can you not want anything? Isn't it silly?" I didn't care. I just wanted to run. Immediately, I ran towards a wall and began to claw. I began to claw, and the blood began to seep out. She began laughing and walked towards me. And then she took one of my fingers and began to suckle on it. I wanted out. This was too much. This was too much. I began to yell. She just smiled. And finally, I tried to escape her grasp. As I tried to move away, she grabbed both my right and left wrist and put her feet on my left and right, and she splayed me. "You are not going anywhere. You're mine, remember?" I was just held. And then I woke up. I saw the shadow, and this time it was slower to move. I looked at my wrist. Resin. I looked at my legs around my ankle. Resin. I began to laugh. What the hell is happening? Next day after that, I went to church and asked a priest. I was embarrassed to tell anyone. The priest could offer nothing much. It was shocking. I showed him, and the priest said, "Maybe you are carving these into yourself." I said, "Why?" And the priest said, "I don't know. In the past, we used to look at God. Now we realize the demons are with us, but still pray." But I told him about the shadow, and he said, "Yes, maybe it is something beyond us, but it is now with us." I wanted to sleep that night. I was scared. I was alone. I wanted somebody with me, and that's when I realized. She knew I wanted somebody. People will take advantage of us. The demon knew what to do then. I went back to sleep, and when I woke up, she was right in front of me. I told her, "What do you want?" She said, "I want your blood. I'm like a vampire. I don't have fangs, but I can tear you apart. But I don't want to tear you apart. I kill you. I don't have blood." I asked her, "Why did you say I wanted resin?" "Oh, because resin isn't just rains, it's also risen." I said, "What does that mean?" And she said, "You'll find out." And then I woke up and I saw her right in front of me. She wasn't a shadow anymore. Her eyes were red. Her skin was gray. Her hair was splintering. She walked onto my bed and looked at me, and then she took a nail. It was sharp and she sliced right across me. There was a wound and the blood began to spool, and she began to suck, and I stood still. And then she left, and I heard, "You will always be mine. You can't do much now. Tell somebody else. They will never believe you. I will make the scabs go away. I will make you feel more pain than you ever have. You cannot escape me. You are mine, and in due time you will like that. You want this. You know you want this." And she left. And so I am now typing this. Somebody please help. I just heard siren. When I was 7, I didn't have any real friends. I didn't need any. I was happy enough playing with the monsters who lived in the forest in our backyard. I don't remember exactly when or how I met them. I don't remember their names either. I just remember them consisting of 3 big furry monsters. One of them had what appeared to be a crocodile snout with a pig nose. Another looked like a gorilla with bull horns. The third resembled a lion with gigantic fangs that extended past his chin. I remember about the day I first met them. They insisted we play hide and seek and that I would be it. We did just that, and I had a lot more fun than I expected. Every day I would go into the forest to play with my new friends. We never played the same game twice in a row. I remember us playing tag, I spy, and a whole bunch of others. I told my parents about my friends, and they seemed to be perfectly fine with me hanging out with them, just as long as I was back before sundown. I remember my friends having a home in the form of a small cabin with only one room. The furniture consisted of a single table and 4 chairs, where we would sit and eat snacks. There were also 2 closets, one on each side of the room, but I never paid much attention to those. I remember one day my parents announced that we were moving. I told them that I didn't want to leave my forest monster friends behind, but they promised I would make more friends at our new place. Right before moving day, I went to the forest to find my friends. As soon as I found them, I told them that my family would be moving to a new house. They seemed to be very saddened by this and begged me not to leave them. I told them I didn't want to leave either, but it was my parents' decision, not mine. After we moved, I eventually made some real friends and forgot all about my old friends in the forest. As I got older, my parents constantly told me that I had a vivid imagination as a child, and that I had a whole bunch of imaginary friends I played with in the woods. But the details of these friends were extremely foggy. 15 years later, I went to visit the neighborhood I was born in. I recognized my childhood home, which was now abandoned, and I decided to go and check it out. I went into the backyard and recognized the deer trail leading into the woods. I followed the path until I arrived at a very familiar-looking cabin. I knocked on the door, and it fell off its rusty hinges. I peeked into the one room and saw a familiar cobweb-covered table and 4 warped chairs. I walked over to one of the closets and opened it. Inside, hanging on hooks, were 3 monster masks and 3 matching furry suits that looked like they hadn't been worn in years. As soon as I saw those masks, memories began flooding back, and I instantly remembered my friends from my childhood. All along, they had been people in costumes. I then walked over to the second closet and opened that one. What I saw inside nearly made me vomit. Laying against the closet wall were a bunch of skeletons. Child skeletons. Each about the same size as I would have been when I was 7. My friends were monsters, all right. Just not the kind I thought they were. The rain pattered hard on the window. It was late on a Tuesday night in 2007. My parents had just left for a long work trip. I was 17 at the time. Dad suggested I go on a camping trip so I'd have something to do while they were away. It wasn't that they wanted me out of the house. That wasn't like them. After presenting the idea to my friends, they suggested we book a cabin so we'd have a place to stay. That sounded great to everyone in the group, so we decided to start looking. After searching online, we found a cabin that was both affordable and nice. 2 beds, 2 baths, 1,400 square feet. It was ideal for a week-long stay for 4 people. The group included me, Alex, Josh, and Juan. Alex was a bright young man, known for being the smartest in our group. At 24, he was the oldest of us. Josh, at just 15 years old, he was the youngest. Juan was not exceptionally smart, but not clueless either. At 22, he was the second oldest. Then there was me, Michael. At 17, I was the second youngest in the group. The rain was getting worse, and we could see a storm cloud rolling in. Luckily, my father had given me plenty of lessons on driving in the rain. Little did I know just how much I'd need that knowledge for this trip. At first, the car ride was smooth. We took the highway, but after traveling a certain distance, we were off the city roads and driving through the middle of nowhere. The road had lots of bends and curves at first, but eventually it straightened out. Then it started raining heavily. The rain didn't ease up at all. It just kept coming down harder. As we got closer to the cabin, Josh looked at the instructions we'd printed. It said we needed to look under the planter pot by the porch to find the key. Simple enough. Josh and I joked for a while about how bold it was to leave the key in such an obvious spot. When we arrived, we grabbed our bags from the car and ran to the porch through the rain. We lifted the pot, found the key, and opened the door. Inside, I immediately felt cold. Maybe it was just the rain, or maybe the thermostat was set low, but something felt off. I dismissed the feeling, thinking it was just paranoia. We turned on the lights and started looking around. The bathroom was tidy, as though someone had cleaned it recently. The larger bedroom had a big bed, a closet with a robe, and a fresh batch of clean towels. The smaller bedroom had a smaller bed, and the other bathroom wasn't as tidy but wasn't dirty either. There was a TV in the front room, but it only had a few channels. The fridge held some fruit and 5 servings of some kind of meal. That first night went great. Everyone ate dinner and chose their beds. Once everyone was settled, it was my job to turn off all the lights. I started in the kitchen, then the main room, and lastly in my and Josh's room. I turned off the light, and we all went to bed. The next morning, we ate breakfast, hung out outside for a bit, and then decided to go on a hike. While exploring, I came across an old, broken-down shed. Something about it felt off. It looked like it had been a utility shed for the cabin's owner. I showed the rest of the group, and they were just as creeped out as I was. After more exploring, we headed back to the cabin. But when we walked in, something was wrong. The lights weren't how we'd left them, and some doors were open. Doors Alex swore he had closed. Our first thought was that we weren't alone. We stood in silence until Juan yelled, "Hello?" No one answered, as expected. The rest of the night, everyone was unusually quiet. We made plans to lock all the doors in the house, including the bedroom doors. I turned off the lights again and we all went to bed. At 4:40 a.m., I woke up to a noise from the kitchen. Josh woke up too and asked, "What was that?" I grabbed my flashlight and headed downstairs to investigate. Juan and Alex came out of their rooms, probably for the same reason. We found a cabinet open, with some of its contents spilled onto the floor. This made us all question whether we were truly safe in the cabin. We tried to go back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The next day, we decided to stay at the cabin to make sure nothing else happened. It was uneventful. We watched a movie and later decided to go to the store. Someone had to stay behind, so we wrote our names on slips of paper and drew one from a cup, the name drawn, Michael. "That's me," I said. Everyone left while I stayed on the couch. At first, everything was fine. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. It looked like someone was trying to come down the stairs but retreated when they saw me. A chill ran down my spine. I slowly crept upstairs. When I opened the door to my room, I saw something I'll never forget. 7 people were gathered in a circle, chanting. In the middle of the circle was a pedestal holding a crying baby. The people were wearing red, long capes with big hoods. At first, I wasn't noticed by anyone. Then someone saw me standing in the doorway. They all slowly looked over at me in unison. I took off running. I bolted downstairs and out the door, calling Alex in a panic. "Don't come back to the cabin. I repeat, don't come back. Stay at the store. I'll meet you there." He sounded confused, but I told him, "There's no time to explain. Just stay put." When I got to the store, I told them what I'd seen. We decided to hitchhike home. We never looked back. To this day, we've never told anyone about what happened at that cabin, nor do we ever plan to. Once we arrived home, we sat down and unpacked. I explained in much more detail about the events of that day and exactly what I saw. Next thing we know, there was a knock at the door. I look over and answer it, expecting my parents. Oh man, was I wrong. I'm greeted with a strange-looking man. He had a long gray beard, a large nose. He then asked if Michael, me, was here. At first I hesitated, but I told him that I am who he was looking for. He walked inside without permission, which was off-putting. He told me I was a witness of something I shouldn't have seen. This sent chills down my spine. I give my friends a look. We all jump up and run. The man quickly grabs my arm. His grip is stronger than anything I've ever felt before. I can't get out. He drags me to his car and puts me in the back. He starts heading back towards the cabin. I start doing anything I can to try to escape. Nothing is working. Once we arrive, he drags me out of the car. I am now in the cabin writing this from my phone in the living room, and the rest of the cultists are upstairs preparing. I don't know what they are going to do to me, but I know it won't be good. Human teeth by the looks of it. Molars, incisors, and every tooth in between. It had to be about 40 pounds of teeth tightly wrapped in potato sacks inside a blue duffel bag that looked identical to mine. I wish I had double-checked the contents at the airport, but I was so exhausted by my flight that I just wanted to get home. And now all my clothes, toiletries, and Hawaiian souvenirs are gone, replaced by a bag that belongs to either the tooth fairy or some psychotic dentist. Seriously, how the hell did this get through security? I put on some kitchen gloves and dug around through the teeth, hoping to find some form of identification. There was nothing but more teeth. Then I received a text on my phone that stiffened my entire back. Where are my fucking teeth? I was more confused than ever. Was the person who expected this bag seriously texting this phone right now? How did they get my number? Instinctively, I looked around my empty apartment, threatened by the message. But of course, the only movement was my own reflection on the balcony glass. Then my phone received a picture of an open blue duffel bag. Inside was my red summer shorts, along with my surfboard keyring and tiki mask magnet. They have my stuff. You have our teeth, and we know who you are. There came another picture of a crumpled form I filled out to go scuba diving. It was left in the outer pocket of my duffel bag. My name was listed, my address, even my phone number. Oh, shit. Then I received a call from an unknown caller. I put the phone on the ground and let it ring out. Each ring sent a buzz through my hardwood floor and a shiver up to my neck. Another text. We know where you live. Give us the teeth. Terrible scenarios flooded my mind. Men wearing balaclavas bursting through the door with army boots and pointing their gleaming knives at my face. Zap straps tightening around my feet and hands, cutting off all circulation. Days of being locked in a cargo container and having to suck the moisture from filthy puddles for sustenance. Okay, relax. Chill. I had a habit of watching too much true crime. I ran through the options. They all seemed like imperfect solutions. 1. I could call the police, but I didn't know if they could help me. They would have no idea who this tooth person is either. I doubt they would put me in witness protection based on a few texts. 2. I could go stay at a hotel in a different town, but how long would I have to wait? They know where I live. They could visit at any time. I'd be living in danger. Before I could stop myself, I texted back. This was an accident. I'll give you back the bag. I didn't mean to take it. I stayed there, kneeling by the tooth bag, waiting for a reply. You will drop the bag at park. There is a wooden bench on the south end dedicated to the fire hall. You will place the bag beneath there at 10 p.m. I breathed a sigh of relief. Instructions, clean and simple. That park was across from my apartment. I could do that, no problem. Another text. And you must add one of your front teeth. My throat tightened. What? I quickly texted back. What do you mean? Because of your interference, a price must be paid. One of your front teeth. They can't be serious. I stood up and closed the blinds on my balcony, paranoid that someone can see me. I had typed the single word "why," but never hit send. How could they even know if I added a tooth in or not? There were thousands of teeth in that bag. I lightly touched my 2 front teeth, so firmly panted in the roof of my mouth. How would I even pull a tooth out? Arriving around 9:30 p.m., the park was pretty cold. Most nights it snowed this time of year, but luckily it had been pretty dry for a while, so I didn't need to wear too many layers. The bench dedicated to the fire hall was easy to find, and I shoved the tooth bag directly beneath it with a paper note on top. Sorry about the mix-up. I sat on the bench for a little bit, pretending to look at my phone. There was an old man out for a walk through the park, and a young couple with their dog. I didn't want them to think I was dropping off a bomb or drugs or something, so I stuck around for a bit and smoked a single cigarette. 1 cigarette turned to 3, then 4. I couldn't help myself. I was nervous. Would they know I didn't add my teeth? After considering it back and forth in the apartment, I left my front teeth alone. If they really wanted some extra teeth, I figured I could stop by a dental office on a later date and get them all the teeth they wanted. I just couldn't bring myself to grab a wrench and pry perfectly healthy teeth out of my own mouth. At 9:53, the park emptied out and it started to get freezing. It was my cue to exit. I took one last drag, exhaled a large plume of smoke, and I saw it contour around the edges of a strange, unseeable shape. It was really odd. It felt like there was something invisible standing only inches away. As I tried to move forward, a bone-like hand found my throat. 2 yellow eyes appeared, floating in the air. Filthy liar, you didn't add your pain. What? The powerful grip lifted me by the throat. I brought my hands down against a wiry, invisible arm. Each tooth remembers. The voice came as a seething whisper. Every tooth retains the pain from when it was pulled. My assailant lifted me a whole foot above the ground. I couldn't breathe. Lord Fowl needs his shipment of pain. You delayed it. Please, I tried to say, but could only make a choking sound. Gak, ack. The entity dropped me to the ground. I inhaled and immediately tried to crawl away, but an invisible knee pinned me down. And now you must top off the pain with a fresh garnish. 2 invisible hands forced their way into my mouth and pried open my jaw. I tried to fight back, to close my mouth, but it was no use. This entity, whatever it was, had incredible strength. A fresh dollop of pain will rejuvenate the supply. M2 frontmost teeth, my buck teeth, were effortlessly bent outward and snapped off. I shrieked from the pain. Tears streamed instantly. That's for stealing our bag. As if my teeth were the tabs on a soda can, the entity began to bend each one outward. All my upper front teeth, then my lower, one by one. That's for lying. That's for screaming. That's for being fucking irritating. My gums became a fountain of blood. The pain in my mouth was catastrophic, each nerve ending raw and on fire. I tried to scream for help, but the knee on my chest weighed down harder. Soon I could barely make a sound. The hands plucked out all my bent, broken teeth like a series of pull tabs. Pwick, pwick, pwick. Lord Fowl will be most pleased. The bony fingers traveled further into my mouth. Sharp nails dug beneath my molars and pulled. The last thing I remember was looking up and seeing the yellow eyes stare back at me. 2 glowing moons from hell. I almost bled to death that night. Thankfully, someone found me passed out in the park and called an ambulance, which took me into a hospital, where I recovered for 6 days straight. My mouth was a wreck. Every single tooth ripped out, every single one. There were half-inch wounds all over the roof and floor of my mouth. No conventional dentures would even fit in my desiccated gums. It took 3 months of visiting the dentist to slowly reconstruct what was destroyed. And even now, I still have to wear 2 different sets of dentures. One for daytime, which allowed me to carefully chew food, and one for nighttime, which slowly bent my fucked gums back into place. I have no idea what the hell attacked me that night. I don't really want to think about it, or about what happened to that duffel bag full of teeth. I've since moved cities, as you might expect. In fact, I no longer live in the US. I've moved far away. Most importantly, I bought a custom-built suitcase off the internet with zebra stripes. I've pinned bright yellow plastic stars all over and many other identifiers too. It might look like a tacky eyesore, but I'll never confuse it for someone else's bag. If you're ever at the airport and you recognize my bag from this story, I give you permission to come up and say hi. I make it a point to try and meet friendly people and move forward with my life. Who knows? If you catch me in the right mood, I may even show you my removable teeth. As far as I know, I'm the only 27-year-old with full-blown grandma dentures. They say death smiles at us all. Sometimes all we can do is smile back. I feel comfortable telling this story now, as with the passage of time, this feels like a long-forgotten dream. I grew up in a small town in northwest Canada, far beyond the quaint summer towns of the Gold Coast. A place much closer to Earth's last frontier. A land where nature and brutality still coincide. Our small town had little more than a school, store, and police station. If any of the local loggers were injured on the job, it'd be an hour's helicopter ride to the nearest hospital. As far back as I can remember, we were warned to never stray from the main roads. Looking back on it now, this is perfectly understandable, as the threat of grizzlies, cougars, and even mankind was enough to dissuade any brave youngster from venturing too far off the beaten path. That was until Michael went missing. There had long been stories that the woods were haunted. Tales of ancient creatures driven to one final refuge untouched by mankind. They said they lived down deep in the caves and caverns of the Canadian Rockies, and only came out when their hunger could no longer be staved off. Michael was last seen on November 8, 1981, at the age of 14. A boy 2 years older than myself at the time. Even now I still remember his bright face running around the schoolyard. There were little more than 15 of us that made up the student population of that school. As a result, we shared many classes together. Michael had been missing for more than 3 days before a manhunt was announced. People from nearby towns would be coming to help out. Patrols were to begin as soon as possible of the surrounding areas. I recall our teacher telling us that school would be finishing early that day, and our parents would be collecting us. Any and all help was to be accepted by the local search. I recall at the time telling my closest friend James that we had to be a part of it. While I was sympathetic to a boy from my school going missing, I'll admit that my interest in the search was for far more selfish reasons. For years I had kept myself away from any of the forbidden areas of our town. However, natural curiosity had long gotten the better of me. I jumped at the chance to volunteer for Michael's search party. I had to know what the forest looked like, the scent of the pine cones or sheer size of the massive evergreens that had for so long encircled me. I had to delve deeper. Surprisingly, given myself and James's proximity to Michael in school, he and I were assigned to a local deputy to provide insight and aid in the search. I guess they thought we could more easily recognize any of Michael's personal belongings. Armed with little more than a head torch and a whistle, the 3 of us set out to cover an area of terrain that led deeper into the forest than I had ever ventured. The first thing I remember feeling was the cold. Anyone familiar with the Pacific Northwest knows that in areas of abundant darkness like dense forest, life is unlikely to thrive. The forest floor was covered in nothing but rock, pine cones, and needles, particularly difficult to gain your footing on in the dark. The behavior of the deputy, while chipper and accommodating to his younger guests, was not one of confident expertise. We spent hours combing the forest floor with nothing to show for it, until finally we came to the entrance of a cave. Just below the mouth, we saw it, a small red glove that could be none other than Michael's itself. Any feeling of adventure I previously had left me in one breath. Now only fear remained. The deputy noted fresh tracks leading into it. He unholstered his bear spray and told us he was going to take a quick look inside and to stay put for a moment. We watched him enter, his silhouette quickly being engulfed in nothing but abject darkness. We were alone. Myself and James shared worried looks, reassuring each other that the deputy would be back at any moment. 10 minutes turned into 30, and 30 minutes became an hour. We were going to have to search the cave to find him. Entering the cave was an assault on the senses. Not only could we barely see with our now low-on-battery head torches, but the stench was unlike anything I had ever encountered. I recall James and I faintly hearing a strange sound. "Deputy!" we shouted into the abyss. We found Michael's body before long. What remained was little more than a pile of fabric and bone. James began to scream while I froze in horror, too stunned to run. I recall being knocked off of my feet, suddenly losing my balance and vision when my head hit off the rocky floor. My last memory of James, hearing a loud crunch while his screams were cut short. It was the sound that woke me. Animalistic gnashing, tearing, gulping echoed across the damp cave walls. I remember scrambling across the floor searching for my head torch, its low orange light illuminating the wall of the cave. I placed it on my head and turning, I saw it. Crawling slowly from the far side of the cave, a creature unlike any I'd ever seen before or since. Its face made up of pale white skin stretched tight across an inhuman skull, so tight that the skin pulled above its teeth into a permanent smile. Blood dripped from its putrid mouth as its eyes, black as coal, sized me up. I was lucky. It was already fatigued from its attack on the deputy and James. It curiously advanced towards me, grinning its sickening grin. Thinking back now, I have no idea why I did it, but slowly I began to bar my teeth. Showing my upper canines, peeling my own lips upwards, I smiled at the creature. It came closer and closer until we were eye to eye. Smelling my best friend on its breath, behind tears in my eyes, I smiled harder, gritting my teeth to the point I thought they might break. The last feature I recall of the beast were its eyes deep and dark, not of my world, as though there was an entire universe housed within them. In an instant, the creature leapt away from me, back to its feast. I ran. It was daybreak by the time I exited the cave. I ran until my legs could take me no further, and then I crawled. I crawled until I no longer felt the sting of pine on my knees, but concrete. They found me passed out in the middle of a road leading into our town. I was filthy and covered in blood and bones. Based on what I told the police, the bodies of James, Michael, and the deputy were found. The entire incident chalked up to a savage bear. I spoke nothing of what I saw in that cave. Who would believe me if I did? 2 young boys entered that cave. Neither ever truly left. I haven't smiled since. I stared at the door before me, its surface peeling like old skin. This wasn't supposed to be here. I was sure of it. It hadn't been on the blueprints. But old houses always have their secrets, don't they? My curiosity gnawed at me until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I reached for the knob, turned it, and stepped inside. The air shifted instantly, sending a chill skittering down my spine. The room was empty, completely empty, except for another door directly ahead. I turned back, expecting to see the way I'd come in, but my stomach dropped. The door I'd just stepped through was gone. I froze, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "All right, weird," I muttered, trying to keep calm. With no other choice, I approached the second door and opened it. The next room was smaller, just by a little. The walls felt closer, the ceiling a bit lower. Like the first room, it was empty, except for the door waiting at the far side. I hesitated, but then I stepped through. And again, and again. Each room was smaller than the last. At first it was subtle, barely noticeable, but as I moved deeper, the wall started closing in. The ceiling lowered until I could feel it brushing against my hair. The air grew colder, thinner. "Hello?" I called out, my voice bouncing hollowly off the shrinking walls. Nothing, no response. I turned to go back, but there was no way back. The doors behind me were gone, only the next door ahead remained. The rooms kept shrinking. The once normal spaces became claustrophobic. I was crouching after a while, then crawling. The light dimmed to a faint, sickly glow, and my breaths grew shallow and panicked. By the time I reached the last door, I could barely move. The walls scraped my shoulders, the ceiling pressed on my back. It felt like the house itself was trying to crush me. Somehow I squeezed through the final opening. My chest was heaving. My heart thundered in my ears. That's when I saw it. The room was the size of a coffin, and standing there impossibly was me. But it wasn't me. Not really. It had my face, my clothes, my build, but everything about it was wrong. Its eyes gleamed, too sharp, too bright. Its smile twisted unnaturally, stretching far too wide. "You made it," it said, its voice exactly like mine, but colder, hollow. "I've been waiting." I tried to scream, to scramble backward, but the room was too small. The thing reached out and grabbed me, its fingers ice-cold and impossibly strong. Before I could react, it yanked me forward. In a blur, I felt myself pulled into it, or maybe it pulled itself into me, I couldn't tell. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the first room again. It was bigger now, back to normal. The doorway I'd come through had returned. I stared down at my hands. They weren't mine. The skin was pale, veined, foreign. The door creaked open behind me. A new figure stepped inside. A stranger, wide-eyed and curious just like I had been. I tried to scream to warn them not to go any further, but my lips wouldn't move. My body wasn't mine anymore. Instead, I smiled, that same grotesque, too-wide smile. "Welcome," I heard myself say. Nobody ever believes me when I tell them about the happy dancers. I first saw them up in the hills as a kid. I was maybe 8 or 9 when it started. My mom had a close friend who lived up in the hills, where I'm from. It doesn't take long to get from the suburbs that hug the central city to the hills that surrounded us. It wasn't a very big place, and so we would visit them every other weekend. I always liked going up there. They had a son I'd hang out with who I'll call Jay, and our mums would usually get pizza for us while they talked and laughed in the dining room. One night while driving back home, the streetlights that often illuminated the twisting and winding roads weren't working, leaving only the red lights on the railing that protected us from many descending kilometers of darkness. I'd always been afraid of the idea of us accidentally driving through the railing after taking a tight corner too fast, tumbling and crashing down into the earth. Naturally, my mom was taking each corner with much more caution and deliberation than usual, especially the tight blind spot corners, which there were many of. While she slowly peeked around a corner before the final stretch home, the headlights had exposed what looked to be a young woman in a white dress standing on the side of the road. There was no sidewalk or much room for her in general, so this was really unusual and obviously dangerous. I remember pointing it out to my mom, and she said she didn't see anybody. I was in disbelief as we passed her without so much as a sound. She was so close to the car, I was scared we would hit her over the railing. I looked behind me through the back window, and the woman was performing some kind of dance. It was beautiful and elegant, with ethereal grace and precision. It was similar to ballet, but her feet weren't on her tippy toes or anything. In fact, they barely seemed to touch the ground at all. They glided across the road as if there wasn't even a speck of friction. I pointed it out to my mom, who once again said there was nothing there. But I wouldn't let up about it the whole drive home. I knew what I saw, and I wanted Mom to have seen her dancing too, because it really was beautiful. I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like the movements of her body, despite the darkness of the night, had completely hypnotized me. I remember for the next 2 weeks before going back there. Every night I desperately replayed it over and over in my head, trying to conjure up new details to swoon over. I remember being in class and unable to concentrate. It was all I could think about. The next time we were driving up there, I was watching the roads like a hawk. My attention was drawn to them like iron to a magnet. And even though I'd seen her on the way home, there was an intense instinct to make sure I didn't miss anything. But alas, it was a regular drive through the setting sun as it normally was. The night was uneventful. Truthfully, I barely remembered what I even did because my mind was so locked in on the trip home, so locked in on the roads that brought us to and from, and it felt only moments had passed after arriving, that the darkness of night was long past joining us and my mom telling me we were leaving. I could barely contain my excitement, but I didn't tell Mom about it. I'd been sitting on it for 2 weeks, which as an 8-year-old was an eternity, and now I wanted it all for myself, as if it was a secret for me and me alone. One small thing that my mom couldn't control. The streetlights were still out of order. something that seemed to really agitate my mum as she rambled about the dangers of the layout of the roads, the irresponsibility of the local council, and other equally valid concerns that completely flew over my head as I pierced through the window with uncompromising intensity. And that's when I saw them, a few tight turns sooner than before, illuminated by my mum's headlights. But this time it wasn't just the young woman, but a group of them, all standing in a line behind the railing and holding hands. They all wore outfits that were white, and all either a dress or long robes. But this time I could see their faces, and they all smiled, these huge, bright smiles that almost acted as their own sources of light. Their teeth were impossibly white, their skin impossibly smooth. They moved and danced in unison as we passed them, spilling over the railing and into the road behind us. My mum kept asking what I was looking at, but I didn't care to explain it even if I could. It was indescribable. They flowed like gravity didn't matter. They weaved in and out of each other, conjoining and then letting go, in these patterns that I wish I could explain. It brought a tear to my eye. Right as we were turning the last corner, I swear I could see them climbing on top of each other to form a strange shape, kind of like a triangle, I think, but it was dark and more silhouette than anything else. And like a well-trained hive mind, they scattered over the railing and into the pitch black. I didn't see them after that for years, but I always thought about them. I was just as enamored as a 12-year-old as I was when I was 8. Every night, I replayed it, painting shapes in my mind using their dancing movements as the brush, obsessing over the feeling of enticement I'd felt those 2 nights. By the time I was approaching the age of 13, I really began to wonder if I even saw anything at all. That was before they began to appear everywhere in my teenage years, from my first year of high school, like a multiplying infection that only I was able to see. In hindsight, I wish I'd never seen the happy dancers, never noticed them that one night, because when they returned all those years later, they weren't how I remembered them at all. I need to share this, not because I want to, but because I have to. What I've discovered needs to be documented, even if, well, you'll understand by the end. I've spent most of my adult life investigating paranormal phenomena. Not the theatrical ghost hunting you see on those reality TV shows. I mean real, methodical research. I've logged thousands of hours in allegedly haunted locations across 3 continents, interviewed hundreds of witnesses, and documented every unexplained occurrence I could find. My archives include everything from the infamous third-floor footage at Waverly Hills Sanatorium to the unexplained EVP recordings from Eastern State Penitentiary. I've witnessed authentic voodoo rituals in New Orleans, where I saw a man speak perfect 17th century French despite never studying the language. I've spent 3 weeks documenting the alleged poltergeist activity at England's ancient Ram Inn, where I recorded furniture moving on its own and captured thermal images of impossible cold spots. I've investigated the Poveglia Plague Island in Venice, where my equipment recorded whispers in medieval Italian dialects that linguists couldn't fully translate. I've spent nights in Japan's Aokigahara forest, where compass needles spin randomly and GPS devices malfunction for no explicable reason. I even participated in the infamous Philip experiment recreation in Toronto, where our group manifested phenomena that defied current scientific understanding. But after 15 years, I was ready to quit. Because despite all these experiences, despite the overwhelming amount of documentation, I couldn't prove anything definitively supernatural. Every single case could ultimately be explained by natural causes, psychological factors, or elaborate hoaxes. Then, last month, while organizing my research files, I found something different. Something that made me question everything I thought I knew about the supernatural. Something that made me wish all those ghost stories were real. Because what I discovered is far worse than any haunting I've ever investigated. It's called a hatrer. Not a ghost, not a demon, but something that defies classification. In all my years of paranormal investigation, I've never encountered anything like it. Nothing seems to stop it, not the tools we use to detect spirits, not the methods we use to banish them. It exists for one purpose, though that purpose seems to change with each new manifestation. The only constant is the way it hunts, the way it tortures, defying both physics and human comprehension. Let me share some cases I've verified through multiple sources, including police reports, autopsy records, and witness testimonies. What you're about to read isn't folklore or urban legend. These are documented incidents that various authorities have tried to suppress. The first verified case occurred in Boston, 2024. A luxury apartment complex, the Blackwood Residences, was built using materials from a demolished 19th century church. St. Mary's had stood for over 150 years, surviving fires, wars, and natural disasters. The local community fought to preserve it, but money talks, especially in real estate. What happened next defied all logical explanation. It started with Marcus Reynolds, the developer who had authorized the church's demolition. They found him in his penthouse, his body somehow transformed into the same type of stone used in St. Mary's foundation. But here's the truly terrifying part. It wasn't just his body. Every single piece of St. Mary's that had been repurposed, door hinges turned into decorative fixtures, stone fragments mixed into new concrete, even the dust that had settled in local gardens, all of it was systematically destroyed. The building's maintenance logs document increasingly bizarre occurrences. March 15th, stone fragments reported moving against gravity. March 18th, walls bleeding ancient mortar. March 20th, security cameras catching glimpses of a figure made of church stone. March 23rd. First transformation. The time-lapse footage from the morgue shows something impossible. Over 48 hours, Reynolds' body gradually transformed into stone. Not petrification, actual 19th century church stone. Even his blood had crystallized into tiny, perfect replicas of St. Mary's architectural details. But that was just the beginning. Over the next month, everyone involved in the church's demolition met similar fates. Each death was more prolonged and agonizing than the last. The construction foreman survived for 72 hours as ancient building materials materialized inside his body. The demolition crew members were found in their homes, their flesh slowly turning to stained glass and mortar. The final victim was the project's lead architect. Security cameras caught his last moments. The footage shows him alone in his office at 3 a.m., when the stone beneath his feet began to ripple like water. The video was classified after 3 police officers who viewed it had to be institutionalized. Then, as suddenly as it started, the incident stopped. But something else began. Just as the church incidents ended, something equally disturbing began at the Black Ridge coal mine in Wyoming. At first, there seemed to be no connection. Why would an entity that hunted down church materials suddenly appear in a coal mine? But what I discovered suggests these weren't separate events at all. In April 2024, shaft number 7 collapsed due to neglected safety protocols. 6 miners died, trapped 400 feet underground. The official report blamed structural failure, but my investigation revealed something darker. The safety inspector, David Cooper, had been taking bribes to overlook critical maintenance issues for years. I obtained Cooper's personal diary through a contact in the police department. The final entries are disturbing. Day 1. The dust is acting strange. It moves against the air current, forms shapes. Today I swear I saw Thomas's face in it. Thomas, who died in shaft number 7, his mouth was moving. Day 3. They're all there now. All 6 of them, in the dust. They watch me. The ventilation system keeps failing. Every time I fix it, more dust comes, black dust, coal dust, but it's wrong. It moves like it's alive. Day 5. I can feel it in my lungs. Not like normal coal dust. This is different. It's cold, so cold it moves. Oh God, it's moving inside me. Cooper was found in his office 2 weeks later. The security footage I recovered shows his final hours, and it's the most disturbing thing I've ever witnessed. The dust didn't just kill him, it hunted him. When he sealed himself in a clean room, the coal particles seeped through microscopic gaps. When they rushed him to the hospital and completely replaced his blood through transfusion, the coal somehow reformed inside his new blood within hours. The doctors said his internal organs had been replaced by pure coal, still somehow functioning, still somehow keeping him alive through the transformation. But here's what terrifies me most. Every single piece of coal from shaft number 7, whether it was stored in warehouses, shipped to power plants, or even burned to ash, all of it was systematically destroyed. The ash would reform into coal only to disintegrate again. Power plants reported coal spontaneously turning to dust in their furnaces, and that dust would move against the air currents, seeking something. Then, just like the church case, it stopped, and something new emerged. Before I share what's happening now, let me explain something crucial I've discovered. Each case I investigated seemed to end abruptly, only for something new to begin. Never overlapping, never simultaneous. as if only one could exist at a time. The current manifestation started in December 2024. A Japanese software developer, Akiko Tanaka, had created an algorithm that accidentally crashed several small companies' servers, leading to massive financial losses and several suicides. 3 weeks later, her computer began displaying strange code, binary that, when translated, formed images of the ruined business owners. But what happened next defies digital logic. Her code, every piece of it, began to vanish. Not just being deleted, but being systematically erased from existence. Projects she'd contributed to years ago started failing. Open source repositories she'd worked on began corrupting. Even her old forum posts from high school started disappearing, the text transforming into strings of malicious code before vanishing completely. They found her body twisted into the shape of a server rack, her blood replaced with liquid coolant. The autopsy revealed something impossible. Her internal organs had been transformed into computer components, still somehow functioning. Her heart was a mass of tangled USB cables still pulsing with data transfers. Her brain had become a solid-state drive filled with corrupted files. But that was just the beginning. 2 weeks ago, a college student in my city, James Wilson, became the target of what seemed like typical cyberbullying. He had posted about workplace exploitation at his part-time job, criticizing his employer's illegal practices. At first, the harassment seemed normal. Angry comments, threats, the usual toxic internet behavior. Then things got strange. The attackers knew things they couldn't possibly know. They quoted from James's private journal entries, ones he'd written by hand, never digitized. They described his childhood nightmares in vivid detail. One comment described the exact layout of his bedroom, down to the way he arranged his stuffed animals when he was 6 years old. James's last live stream is the most disturbing piece of footage I've ever analyzed. It began at 23:15 on January 18, 2025. I've watched it 17 times now, documenting every detail. 23:15, stream starts. James appears disoriented, his hands visibly trembling. The skin on his fingers has turned black, with a metallic sheen that catches the light unnaturally. You can see his flesh literally sloughing off in sheets, revealing what looks like circuit boards underneath. 23:23. He shows his teeth to the camera. They're not just loose, they're transforming. Each tooth has become semi-transparent, with tiny LED-like lights pulsing inside. When he speaks, you can see binary code scrolling across them. 23:31. The smell becomes noticeable even through the stream. Viewers report a distinct odor coming from their devices, like burning electronics mixed with decaying flesh. Several viewers' computers crash simultaneously, only to restart displaying fragments of James's stream on loop. 23:37. James begins crying, but his tears are black and seem to move with purpose across his face, forming strings of code. He keeps looking at something in the corner of his room, though the camera shows nothing there. 23:40. It's here, he whispers. But it's not what we thought. It's not multiple entities. It's just one. Always one. When it finishes with something, it moves on. Changes, adapts, the church, the mind, Tanaka. They weren't separate cases. It was the same thing, just evolving. 23:41, the stream quality deteriorates. Through the static, James screams, "It doesn't just kill you. It erases you. Everything you were, everything you touched, everything you created. It hunts it all down. And when it's done, something new emerges, something that hates something else entirely. It's not about revenge, it's about complete erasure. Don't you see? It's already..." 23:42. Stream ends abruptly. They found James's body this morning. The official cause of death was listed as unknown, but I obtained the autopsy photos through my police contact. What I saw defied explanation. His internal organs had transformed into computer components. His heart was a mass of tangled USB cables still pulsing with data transfers. His brain had become a solid-state drive filled with corrupted files. His blood had been replaced with liquid crystal display fluid. But what terrifies me most isn't how he died. It's what's happening now. Every digital trace of James is being systematically erased. Not just his social media accounts or emails. Everything. Photos where he appeared in the background are corrupting, his image dissolving into static before vanishing completely. Security camera footage showing him as degrading, his figure being replaced by digital artifacts that spread like a virus through the video files. Even more disturbing, devices he interacted with are failing in impossible ways. His old phone, stored in a police evidence bag, transformed into a mass of writhing circuits before dissolving.